Chapter 387. The Hexapath Devil Sect was ranked 4th in the demonic Tao, just below the Corpse Sect. The one who roared at the four major families was the chief representative of the Hexapath Devil Sect, Yuan Juke. He was an outstanding figure in the demonic Tao, famous for his violent temper and battle prowess. Although the overall strength of the Hexapath Devil Sect wasn't as strong as the other top-ranked sects, Yuan Jukuei's personal strength wasn't any weaker than the other sections. Who injured my disciple? Come out and accept your punishment. Yuan Jukuei roared once more. When he heard that his disciple was beaten up, he immediately ran out to investigate. Although the disciple didn't see who did it, he said that it was someone from the four major families. So he was sure that it was someone from the four major families who did it. How could they accept that their disciple was beaten up when all the sects were gathered here? Furthermore, the Hexapath Devil Sect had no reason to be afraid of the four major families, so they naturally had to get back their face. The expressions of the people from the four great clans changed. This was clearly against the four great clans. As a direct descendant of Bai Changchun, Bai Shan naturally could not let Yu Qianshou come out to accept his punishment. Just as he was about to stand up and fight back, he was stopped by Yu Qianshou, who was behind him. Yu Qianshou slowly stood up. He was still happy when he heard that no one saw who did it, so he wanted to maintain his silence. However, the other party had already pointed at the noses of the four major families. If it was any other sect, he would definitely continue to pretend that he didn't know anything. However, the four major families were related to him, and they would be of great help to him in the future. He didn't want to disappoint them. I was the one who did it. Yu Qianshou admitted it. Everyone had expected this. They were all puzzled. The four major families had always been neutral, and they never had any conflicts with any sections. So why would they attack someone at this moment? It was Yu Qianshou, that madman. That made sense. It's you? Yuan Jukuei was slightly startled. Then, anger rose in his heart. He pointed his finger and shouted, Yu Qianshou, don't you dare run amok in the cultivation world just because you're a bandit. Others give you some face, but you really think you're something? I, Yuan Jukuei, have never put a clown like you in my eyes. How dare a scoundrel like you mess around in front of my Six Paths Demon Sect? Elder brother Yuan, don't be angry, don't be angry. Xiao Wen flashed over, pulled Yuan Jukuei, and comforted him. Xiao Wen, get out of my way. Yuan Jukuei swung his arm, turned around, pointed at Xiao Wen's nose, and scolded, I've always heard that you and this scoundrel are brothers. It's because of people like you that this scoundrel can run amok in the cultivation world. Don't call me elder brother in the future, or it will dirty my ears. Scram! Yuan Jukuei's words could be said to have hit the hearts of the people present. Although Yu Qianshou was happy in the cultivation world, the sects that had been in the cultivation world for many years didn't really look up to Yu Qianshou. If it wasn't for the ambiguous attitude of Fushan Island and 10,000 demons towards Yu Qianshou, someone would have already made a move on Yu Qianshou. Not to mention that Yu Qianshou had the support of the four major families. Yuan Jukuei's words were like a wake-up call to Yu Qianshou. When he looked at the people in charge of the other sects, almost all of them looked down on him. Clearly, they all agreed with Yuan Jukuei's words. Yu Qianshou immediately understood his position in the cultivation world. When he suddenly attacked someone at the entrance earlier, he subconsciously thought that he was afraid of anyone because he was a scoundrel. He thought he was impressive, but in the eyes of the people with a certain level of status in the large sects, they did not look up to him at all. He could only scare those little disciples who didn't have much of a cultivation base. How dare you? Just when Yuan Jukuei told Xiao Wen to piss off, for bellows rang out. The four generals of the Mo family in black furs arrived with a flash and surrounded Yuan Jukuei. Yuan Jukuei glanced around and snorted coldly. 9 people immediately shot out from the crowd and surrounded the 4 generals of the Mo family. They were clearly from the Hexapath Demon Sect. When I was dominating the world, the 4 of you were still slaves to Yan Wuchen, yet you dare to yell at me now. Are you trying to rebel? Yuan Jukuei sneered. Then he waved his hand at the 9 people from the Hexapath Demon Sect and called out, Leave. I like to see just what the 4 generals of the 10,000 demons are capable of. The domineering nature of a demonic cultivator was completely revealed in just a few words. Everyone was slightly speechless. It seemed like Yuan Jiukuwei wanted to deal with the four generals of the Mo family alone. The people from the Hexapath Demon Sect did not say anything else and backed down. After being called slaves, the four generals of the Mo family remained cold. They were not angered at all, but they began to radiate with pressing, killing intent. Qiu Wen was not a good-tempered person either, but his expression immediately returned to normal. He immediately yelled out, "Stop messing around. All of you back off." Hearing that, the four generals of the Mo family immediately flashed behind him. They did not even hesitate at all. "Brother Yuan, calm down. Let's talk things out. There's nothing that can't be resolved." Qiu Yuan was already giving face by saying something like that after being scolded. Otherwise, there was no reason for the 10,000 demons to be afraid of Yuan Jiukuei with their status in the demonic sections. That's right. Now that we're facing a great enemy, let's just bear with it for now. When Zhongping from the Blood Demon Palace originally wanted to watch the show between the 10,000 demons, but seeing that Qiu Yuan had given in, he knew that he couldn't watch it anymore, so he stood up and said something nice. After all, the righteous sects wanted to watch the show between the demonic sects more than him. The demonic sect could watch it, but the righteous sects could not. When Ziyi saw that Yu Qianqiu was in a daze after being scolded, her pretty face immediately turned cold. Senior Bai's disciple was not someone that could be scolded. She stood up and slowly walked towards Yuan Jiukuei. The whole place instantly became incomparably quiet. Yuan Jiukuei vigilantly looked back, and his pupils shrank. He immediately turned around and got into a fighting stance. He could look down on Yu Qianqiu, but he didn't dare to look down on Ziyi. This mysterious woman had fought against 7 experts in the final phase of Tribulation Passing. He knew that he was no match for her, but he couldn't lose the reputation of the Hexapath Demon Sect. Qiu Yuan and Wen Zhongping looked at each other. This woman was not an ordinary person. Her background was mysterious, and they didn't know what her temper was like. The two of them didn't know what to do. Yuan Jiukuei stared at Yu Qianqiu and sneered, "A scoundrel is a scoundrel. He actually needs a woman to stand up for him." "Yuan Jiukuei, watch your mouth. What's wrong with a woman?" A woman's voice sounded. In the field, 10 disciples in white from the Moon Clan stood up. The leading woman flashed over. It was Hua Yinwei, the elder of the Moon Clan. Hua Yinwei had already received a message from Jade Flower Fairy, asking her to protect Yu Qianqiu and Ziyi to the best of her ability. Yuan Jiukuei's words just now finally gave her an excuse. The righteous people were all stunned. How come things were getting more and more complicated? Originally, they only wanted to see the diabolism become a joke, but now even the righteous people were involved. In a second, everyone understood. Yu Qianqiu and Ziyi had joined the Cultivation Alliance with the Moon Clan as their guarantor. The Moon Clan was using this as a pretext to make a fuss. The Fuxian Island and the Moon Clan had always been on good terms. Quan Deming also couldn't sit still. He flashed between the two groups and comforted, "Everyone, let's talk this out. Don't be impulsive. The matter of Yin Bugui's challenge hasn't been decided yet. If we start fighting among ourselves, we'll become a laughing stock." Being blocked by a group of women, Yuan Jiukuei himself was also stunned. "Ziyi, come back." Yu Qianqiu's voice attracted everyone's attention. He walked forward and bowed deeply to Yuan Jiukuei. "Senior Yuan, please calm down. I was too impulsive just now. Please forgive me." He had thought it through. He had to lower his head when it was necessary. Otherwise, it would be hard for him to integrate into this circle. If he didn't integrate into this circle, it would be hard for him to find a chance to make a fortune. He had to bear with it, even if he felt uncomfortable. When his strength matured, he would be able to deal with anyone he wanted. When the various sects heard his words, they immediately felt that it was strange. This madman had always been unforgiving when he had the upper hand. Currently, with the appearance of Ziyi and the others, it was clear that he had already gained the upper hand. Yet, he still ran out to apologize with such a sincere attitude. It was truly surprising. Qiu Yuan stared at Yu Qianqiu with sparkling eyes. He wondered if he had seen wrongly. Although Yuan Jokuei's attitude was commendable, he had crippled a disciple of the Six Paths Devil Sect. Naturally, Yuan Jokuei wouldn't let this matter rest just because of an apology. Yuan Jokuei glared at Lin Yun and said, "Are you trying to let this matter go with just a sentence? May I know what this junior should do to appease senior?" Yu Qianshou asked respectfully. Yuan Jokuei's gaze slowly shifted to Lin Yun's leg. He said in a solemn voice, "I won't say anything else. You broke the left leg of my disciple. If you can break your own leg, this old man will be able to answer to the sect when I return. This old man can also guarantee that the Six Paths Devil Sect will treat this matter as if it never happened." The people of the four major clans also stood behind Yu Qianshou when they heard this. They glared at Yuan Jokuei. The legs of a little disciple with low cultivation actually wanted to trade for the legs of their old ancestor's direct disciple. If they allowed this to happen, they wouldn't be able to return to the four major clans anymore. He looked at Yu Qianshou with an expressionless face. As long as he gave the signal, she would immediately make a move. The other sects also felt that Yuan Jokuei's condition was a bit too harsh. They suspected that he didn't know how to appreciate favors. Sure enough, Yu Qianshou's expression sank in an instant. He rubbed his nose as he looked at the crowd and sneered, "It's not difficult for me to break one of my legs, but I have something to ask all of you. Although the four great clans and I arrived a bit late, it's fine if everyone provoked and insulted us at the entrance. After all, we were the ones who were rude first." He suddenly turned around and pointed at Yuan Jokuei. He shouted, "But what gives a disciple of the Six Paths Devil Sect the right to spit on my face in public? If I spit on your face, will you attack me? I'm afraid you'll even have the heart to kill me, right? There's such a thing? Then he's really asking for a beating." Everyone immediately whispered in each other's ears. Everyone had indeed heard the commotion outside, provoking and insulting the four clans. In such a chaotic situation, there was no guarantee that some naughty disciples would spit on the four clans. Yuan Jokuei was startled when he heard that. How did the Six Paths Devil Sect become the ones who stirred up trouble first? But after thinking about it, he was afraid that it was really possible. He paused and said with some uncertainty, "That's not possible. I've never been afraid of anyone." Yu Qianshou looked around and sneered, "I know that everyone has a lot of misunderstandings about me, causing my reputation in the cultivation world to be bad. But I'm not a deranged person. How could I randomly grab someone and beat them? If Senior Yuan doesn't believe me, why don't you summon the disciple who was beaten? I can confront him directly. Who is right and who is wrong will naturally be clear." Chapter 388. Yuan Jokuei's expression became gloomy. He wasn't completely clueless about that disciple, and he knew that the disciple wasn't very virtuous. But now, as Yu Qianshou had said, he wanted to interrogate the disciple and find out that his side was in the wrong first. If that happened, wouldn't he become a laughingstock? Most importantly, he thought that he was in the right and offended several groups of people. He even threw away the face of the Devil Pass leader, the 10,000 demons. If the truth came out, and it was disadvantageous to his side, he would be embarrassed. While he was hesitating, many people could see his apprehension. Wen winked at Wenjongping and pulled Yuan Jokuei with a smile. "Old brother Yuan, for my sake, this matter ends here. Don't pursue it anymore. I'll send someone to treat that disciple's injury, and I'll definitely return him a healthy leg." "That's right, old brother Yuan. Personal grudges are a small matter, but take the big picture into consideration." When Zhongping also persuaded, Yuan Jokuei naturally understood that these two demonic cultivators were taking the opportunity to give him a way out. If he didn't appreciate it, then he wouldn't know how to appreciate a favor. But he didn't know if Yu Qianshou would fight to the bitter end. This guy was famous for being merciless. Yuan Jokuei looked at Yu Qianshou. Qiu Weiyun understood his meaning, so he walked over to Yu Qianshou with a smile, patted his shoulder, and said, "Old brother Yu, give this old brother some face. And forget it. How about we end this matter here? Since Senior Qiu has spoken, we can swallow this small grievance." Yu Qianshou also looked at Yuan Jokuei and said, I wonder if Senior Yuan still wants to pursue this matter. Humph. Yuan Juke snorted heavily, then flashed back to his original position and sat down cross-legged. His attitude was obvious, indicating that he wouldn't pursue this matter any further. What are you snorting about? Let's see if you still dare to snort when this father destroys your Six Paths Demon sect one day. Yu Qianzhou's brows twitched. It's better if this father doesn't pursue this matter, then I won't waste my breath. He also turned around and returned to his seat. It's all right, it's all right. Everyone, return to your positions. Qiu Yuan waved his hand at the crowd and smiled. The group of people returned to their positions, and this matter was over for the time being. Ziyi was still feeling quite indignant. She looked at Yu Qianzhou beside her and wondered what had happened to him. Yesterday, he had smashed someone's counter because of a single sentence, and today, he was scolded in the nose and endured it. Yu Qianzhou had already put this matter aside for the time being. He had thought that the discussion between the various sects had already ended, but who would have thought that it was still going on? He had no idea what had happened for it to take such a long time. He sat at the back and listened for a while before he understood. It turns out that this time, Yanbu brought 2 Tribulation Realm cultivators with him, as well as 50 Tribulation Realm cultivators. A total of 53 people came to Baihua Palace, intending to reunite with Baihua Fairy as husband and wife. In the end, they were obstructed by the various sects led by the supporting Immortal Island. At that time, both sides almost came to blows. It was unknown what Yanbu was thinking, but when he had the upper hand, he forcefully endured it. Actually, everyone understood that Yanbu wasn't ready to officially turn against the Chinese cultivation world yet. He was probably still waiting for the foreign cultivation world's reinforcements to arrive, and the foreign cultivation world was probably also coordinating this matter. And the Chinese cultivation world wasn't ready either. The main reason was that there were too many sects, so it was hard for them to reach a consensus. The main problem was that once a fight broke out, who would contribute how much money, how much manpower, and who would be the commander? The righteous sects didn't feel at ease handing over manpower and money to the demonic sects, and vice versa. In fact, no one felt at ease handing over their own things to others. A large-scale war wasn't just a fight between 2 people. Once a winner was decided, they would have to be prepared for a long period of time. The longer it lasted, the more spirit stones and manpower would be consumed, and that would be a huge number. Although all the sects had stored a lot of spirit stones for emergencies, no one would take out their money for no reason. Who didn't hope that they would contribute less money and manpower, while others would contribute more? After the war, the strength of the sects might be reshuffled. Everyone wanted to preserve their strength. The foreign cultivation world on Yanbu side, as well as the Chinese cultivation world, were probably facing the same awkward situation, so they didn't start fighting for the time being. In short, whoever was ready first would make the first move. That was for sure. If they couldn't officially turn against each other, they could at least do something like East Wind, West Wind, dampening the other party's morale. And so, last night, Yanbu suddenly sent someone to deliver a Challenge Jade archive to the Cultivation Alliance. The content was very simple. Both sides would send their people to fight 20 rounds. Regardless of whether they were dead or alive, the winner would be determined by the number of wins and losses. The loser would have to pay 1 billion high-grade spirit stones to the winner. Of course, the challenge couldn't be without rules. It was impossible for one side to send an early-stage tribulation-passing cultivator to fight, while the other side sent a late-stage tribulation-passing cultivator to kill the other side. That wouldn't be a challenge. It would be no different from seeking death. Yanbu letter of challenge stated that either side could send their people to challenge the other side first. One person could go on stage repeatedly, but the person sent by the challenge side couldn't have a higher cultivation level than the challenger. Of course, if the challenge side was willing to send someone with a lower cultivation level to die, the opposing side naturally wouldn't have any objections. That night, the Chinese cultivation world replied, "Accept the challenge." This was something that couldn't be avoided. Whoever dared to say the word avoid would probably be drowned in spittle. But 1 billion high-grade spirit stones couldn't possibly be given to a single sect. When it came to apportioning the money and manpower, it would be a little difficult. Anyone could make the argument, but the key was which sect would contribute the money and manpower. Thus, after discussing for half a day, they still couldn't come up with a solution. In short, everyone had thousands of reasons, all of which were for them to contribute less. 1 billion high-grade spirit stones. When Yu Qianshou heard this, his eyes almost emitted a green light, and he and Purple Dress looked at each other in unison. Yanbu Gui came from the 10,000 demons, and now he has become the scourge of the Chinese cultivation world. For this challenge, the 10,000 demons can't absolve themselves from the blame. I'm not saying that the 10,000 demons will pay all of the 1 billion high-grade spirit stones, but the 10,000 demons still have to pay the most. Before the Luo Sect's Zhu Xianxian could finish, Qiu Yuan jumped up and scolded. Bullsh *T. Yanbu Gui has long established his own sect. He is him, and the 10,000 demons is 10,000 demons. If the Luo Sect doesn't want pay, then just say it. Don't always use this as an excuse. This is the whole Chinese cultivation world's business, not the 10,000 demons' business. Qiu Yuan, what you said is wrong. Why didn't someone like Yanbu Gui come from other sects, but from the 10,000 demons? If it wasn't for the 10,000 demons' lack of discipline, this wouldn't have happened. I think Elder Zhu is right. The 10,000 demons should pay the most. The one who said this was the Sword Faction's Elder Duan Tianhua, who was ranked 4th in the righteous sections. That's right. That's right. A group of righteous sects echoed, and they all pointed their spears at the 10,000 demons. The expressions of the demons kept changing. Logically speaking, they should be supporting the 10,000 demons, but only the 10,000 demons could be used against them. If they had to pay more, then so be it. After all, the 10,000 demons had a lot of money, so this amount of money was nothing. Yu Qianshou finally understood. No wonder he saw Qiu Yuan's face the moment he came in. He had become the target of everyone's attacks. Sigh. Yanbu Gui had caused trouble, and now the 10,000 demons had become the scapegoat. It was really hard on Qiu Yuan, who had been running around outside. Duan Tianhua, you're not a good person either. You call yourself a righteous sect, but you're faster than anyone else when something happens. Fine. If you think that this has nothing to do with your sword faction, then please withdraw from the Cultivation Alliance. We, the 10,000 demons, will pay for your sword faction's money. Qiu Yuan pointed at Duan Tianhua's nose and scolded him. Then he looked around at the crowd and patted his chest loudly. If the righteous sects think that this has nothing to do with you, you can all withdraw from the Cultivation Alliance. We, the 10,000 demons, will pay for the righteous sect's money. A bunch of shameless people who call themselves righteous sects, Tui. Qiu Yuan argued with the crowd. He was so angry that his face was red. After he said those harsh words, a few righteous sects immediately stood up and said, Qiu Yuan, speak clearly. Who are you calling shameless? I'm calling a bunch of cowards. Whoever wants to cower in this matter, I'll scold them. Whoever wants to fight, I'll play with them. Qiu Yuan was too lazy to argue anymore. He could not argue, clearly anyway. He would die of exhaustion if he kept arguing with so many people. He happened to glance at Yu Qianshou just now, and his heart lit up. Although he was not as good with words as Yu Qianshou and could always reason, he could learn from Yu Qianshou and act shamelessly, right? Who can still snatch money from me? As soon as the righteous sects stood up, there was no need to mention the 4 generals of the demon clan. A few other sects from the demon clan also stood up. It was fine if they just talked about it, but if they really fought, the other sects from the demon clan would definitely not let the 10,000 demons suffer losses. This time it was lively. As one of the sects stood up, the second one stood up. In the end, the situation of the 10,000 demons alone became a situation where the righteous and the demon clan were fighting. Qiu Yuan's pressure was instantly reduced. He glanced at Yu Qianshou, who was pinching his chin and watching the show. He thought to himself, no wonder this guy could always stir up big trouble with just a little bit of it. This shameless method was just a try, and immediately one family's problem became everyone's problem. At the same time, he could also save himself some trouble. It was worth learning. The situation was a little out of control. The four great clans had always been neutral. They did not belong to the Demon Clan or the Righteous Clan. A few people looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was pinching his chin, and decided to just watch the show. Yu Qianqiu was very happy in his heart. The representatives from the various sects really did not disappoint the sections. They did their best to fight for the greatest benefits for their sections. Everyone, please calm down. I have an idea, but I don't know if everyone is willing to listen to it. Quan Deming from Fu Xian Island saw that the commotion was getting out of hand. He frowned and thought for a while, then immediately shouted. Hearing that there was an idea, and it might even be related to their sects, everyone immediately quieted down and looked at Quan Deming. The latter waved his hand and said, "Everyone sit down. It's not a solution to keep arguing like this. Listen to me slowly." Qiu Yuan took the lead and sat down first. After everyone started arguing, he did not say anything. Instead, he stayed out of it. The people from the various sects also sat down one after another. Chapter 389. Quan Deming stood out like a crane in a flock of chickens. He scanned the crowd and said slowly, "If possible, the top 10 sects of the righteous and demon sects should share the 1 billion. Before he could finish, Yuan Jukue laughed and said, "That's not a good idea. How can our wealth compare to your supporting Immortal Island? This seems to be unfair. Brother Yuan, why don't you listen to Elder Quan first? I believe Elder Quan won't speak without thinking." Qiu Yuan stopped him. In fact, even if there was nothing else, he would agree with this. 20 sects would share 1 billion, and each sect would only get 50 million. This was worth it. All right, I'll listen to supporting Xian Island's opinion. Yuan Jokue smiled disapprovingly. Quan Deming nodded and said, 1 billion is not a small number, but it would be a joke to ask the entire Chinese cultivation world to share it. My suggestion is that supporting Xian Island and 10,000 demons each contribute 100 million. Daluo Sect, Moon Sect, Blood Demon Palace, and Corpse Sect each contribute 50 million. Our 6 sects will take 400 million, and the remaining 600 million will be shared by the other 14 sections. What do you all think? Hearing this, other than the top 10 sects of the righteous and demon sects, the other sects all nodded in agreement. They were not allowed to contribute even 1 spiritual stone. It would be strange if they didn't agree. I think it's fine. Qiu Yuan also stood up and patted his chest. 10,000 demons will contribute this 100 million. 100 million was far better than 10,000 demons. Plus, 10,000 demons was the leader of the demonic sects, so it was reasonable for them to contribute a little more than the other sections. A leader should have the bearing of a leader. I think it's fine. The Daluo Sect, Moon Sect, Blood Demon Palace, and Corpse Sect naturally wouldn't have any objections. First of all, Fuxian Island and 10,000 demons offered twice as much as them. Second, with their status in the cultivation world, offering 50 million was just an average amount. If they still had any objections, it would be too unreasonable. The other 14 sects felt that it was not worth it. The 600 million would be divided among the 14 sects, and each sect would have to share more than 40 million. It was not much different from 20 sects sharing it equally, but most people agreed. It would not be difficult for them to fork out this amount of money. In addition, the few leading sects had already agreed, so it would not be good for anyone to say no. Thus, it was equivalent to tacitly agreeing. Elder Quan, since we have all paid, how should we divide the 1 billion high-grade spirit stones if we win? Yuan Jiokue suddenly asked. The other sects also stared at Quan Deming. That's right. The matter of splitting the money had to be made clear, otherwise there would be problems later on. That's easy, Quan Deming said eloquently. There are only 20 matches in total. Since 20 sects have paid up, I believe that it won't be a problem for 20 of our sects to randomly send out 20 people. The 20 sects that have paid up can all send their people up to fight. If they win, the sect that pays the money will take back the money that the other sects have to share. The 1 billion earned will be divided into 20 portions. As long as the sect wins 1 match, they will get 50 million. The number of matches they win will be the same. If the sect wins all 20 matches, they will take all the 1 billion earned. My supporting Immortal Island will not have any objections. If we lose in the end, everyone can only admit that they are useless. They will definitely not give us the money for free. Huh? Everyone roared with laughter. This was a fair method, so no one had any objections. At least, if they won, they would not lose money. In addition, of course, the more effort they put in, the more benefits they would get. This logic was reasonable everywhere. Just when everyone thought the problem had been solved, Yuan Jokei suddenly stood up and said, I still feel that something is wrong. This was a good method, and it was already considered fair. What was wrong with it? Xiaoyin turned around and said with a slight frown, Brother Yuan, could it be that you have another brilliant idea? Yuan Jokei pointed at the 4 major families and said in a clear voice, the combined strength of the 4 major families is not weaker than some of the top 10 sections. I think the 4 major families should also participate. The remaining 600 million will be divided equally among the 15 families. Each family will get 40 million, which is just right. He suddenly realized that something was wrong. How could he easily believe the words of that scoundrel, Yu Qianshou? But he had tacitly agreed not to pursue the matter. Thinking about it, he felt uncomfortable. When he remembered that the 4 major families were on the same side as Yu Qianshou, he came up with this idea. If they won this challenge, they could talk about it later. If they lost, they could let the 4 major families lose some money. It could also make those people feel disgusted. Everyone knew that Yuan Jokei still had grievances in his heart. They all looked at the 4 major families. Presumably, the 4 major families would not be able to refuse in this situation. Sure enough, Baishan stood up and said, although the 4 major families do not belong to the righteous or demonic sects, we are also part of China. It is reasonable for us to contribute money. After saying that, he sat down. This was also a sign of agreement. Yu Qianshou was happy in his heart. He was worried that he could not find an excuse to intervene and make money. Now, the opportunity came to him. That kid outside did not beat him for nothing. Since the 4 major families have agreed, if there is no other objection, then this matter is settled. Quan Deming asked Qiu Weiyan, Elder Qiu, what do you think? I have no objection. Just let me know when you want to pay. 10,000 demons will not refuse. Qiu Weiyan laughed. He was in a good mood now that a troublesome matter had been solved. Quan Deming nodded and said to the crowd, the other party has more than 50 experts in the crossing calamity stage, and 2 in the final stage. If you want to take this opportunity to make money, you might as well call for experts from your sect. This is much faster than us working hard to earn spirit stones from the spirit stone mine. Everyone laughed and suddenly became spirited, as if it was not difficult to make money. Most people felt that this matter did not concern them and finally did not have to worry. After the matter was settled, the group of people dispersed, leaving a large pile of praying mats on the ground. Naturally, the unlucky disciples on duty would come to clean it up. Ignoring the strange gazes of the outsiders, Yu Qianshou and the others followed by Shan to the Bai family's shop. They had something to discuss. There were some decorations here, so their conversation would not be easily overheard. The shopkeeper of the Bai family shop had already heard about Yu Qianshou beating people at the entrance of the Cultivation Alliance. He was speechless when he saw him. It was hard to imagine how the family could be entangled with such a person. After leading them to the back, the shopkeeper left. The matters of the higher-ups were not something that a shopkeeper, like him, could care about. The date set by the Cultivation Alliance, and Yin Bugue, was tomorrow. Remembering that the other party had 2 experts in the final stage of the crossing calamity stage, after a discussion, Baishan said solemnly, since we have agreed to participate, we must prevent accidents. I will send a message back now and ask the family to invite 2 elders to come here overnight in case of emergencies. The others also nodded and felt that this was appropriate. Unexpectedly, Yu Qianshou rubbed his hands and laughed. That is too troublesome. Why bother 2 elders to come here overnight? I have an idea, but I don't know if I should say it. Wasn't he talking nonsense? If he said it, how could the people of the 4 families not let him say it? The attitude of the 8 people immediately became respectful. Baishan cupped his hands and said, if you have something to say, please say it. We are all ears. Ha ha ha. Yu Qianqiu couldn't stop laughing shyly. He seemed to be a little embarrassed. After a while, he rubbed his hands and said, "This is what I think. For this challenge, the 4 families just need to put their names on it. I will pay the 40 million, and ZE and I will fight. You don't have to worry about it. As for that if we win, you know that I'm a little short of money. We can keep the money we win for the time being. What do you think of my idea?" For money again. The few people looked at each other. Bai Shan looked at him and said suspiciously, "I wonder what stage has Mr. Cultivation reached? Please tell us, so that we can be prepared." Ha ha. Yu Qianqiu laughed and said, "I am really ashamed. I am still in the early stage of nascent soul." The few people looked at each other and didn't say anything. Although it was already very fast for him to reach this stage at his age, this challenge was not a trivial matter. It was not a matter of life and death. Bai Shan shook his head and said, "Please forgive me, mister. I dare not let you take this risk. If there is any accident, I really can't explain to the family." "What are you afraid of? Isn't Luo Qing Tian at the crossing calamity stage? Didn't you still lose to me in the end? You don't have to worry. It is settled. Send the news back. If the 4 families have any objections, let them come to me. You don't need to explain anything." Yu Qianqiu seemed to be more interested in money than his life. He turned around and said to ZE, "I will leave the last stage of the crossing calamity stage to you. Do you have the confidence to win?" "Yes." ZE nodded. At the side, Bai Zizong and the other 3 looked at ZE with complicated expressions. There was a hint of admiration in their gazes. She was beautiful, pure, and had an extraordinary temperament. In addition, she had a high cultivation base and a mysterious background. She was indeed quite tempting. This time, the 4 of them had been sent here to build a good relationship with Yu Qianqiu. However, at the same time, they had received a rather ambiguous mission. If possible, it would be best if they could develop feelings for ZE. Other than Wu Liqing, the other 3 were a little unwilling at first because they had never seen her before. Who knew what kind of person she was? But they also knew that for a big family like theirs, sometimes they couldn't make decisions about relationships. However, when they saw ZE, they were all attracted. They didn't expect a cultivator in the last stage of the crossing calamity stage to be so young and beautiful. They were immediately attracted. However, such a beautiful woman was ordered around by Yu Qianqiu as a maid. It was really a pity. However, they were relieved. Yu Qianqiu clearly didn't have any other relationship with ZE. When you attack, don't be soft. If you can kill them, don't let them go. Even if you let them go, they won't be grateful. Before you go, think about what my master did when 16 soul-forming cultivators joined hands to fight against him. As long as they're your opponents, don't let any of them go. Don't be soft. Kill them all. Yu Qianqiu warned earnestly. He was afraid that ZE would be soft because she didn't have much experience. In a battle of life and death, she would be at a disadvantage. This girl was most convinced by Changchun. At this time, he could only bring up by Changchun to strengthen her confidence. However, when these words fell into the ears of the 4 families, they were shocked. They all knew who Yu Qianqiu's master was. In other words, their ancestors' cultivation was so strong that it was shocking. Chapter 390. Zi's gaze instantly became firm as she nodded her head seriously. Bai Shan cupped his hands and bowed to Yu Qianqiu excitedly. "Sir, can you tell us in detail about the Battle of the East Sea that you mentioned just now?" The people of the 4 great clans all cast expectant gazes at Yu Qianqiu. The legendary battle of the soul formation stage was indeed worthy of admiration. Furthermore, the most powerful protagonists were their own relatives, so the anticipation was even stronger. "Tell you in detail?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He thought to himself, "I heard it from Nongzhu, that old handsome guy. How can I tell you in detail?" He looked serious and sighed. "I can only be fascinated. It's indescribable, indescribable. The kind of realm is beyond our reach. Let's not talk about it." ZE rarely spoke in front of outsiders. At this moment, She clenched her fists and said in a woman's voice, "Elder Bai is undoubtedly the most powerful cultivator in the world. He will admire you for life." Her words were even more inspiring than Yu Qianqiu's. The people from the four major families were extremely excited, especially the people from the Bai family. They blushed and couldn't express their emotions for a long time. Let's go back. Yu Qianqiu turned around and kept shaking his head and sighing as if he had really seen the battle. Zi followed him and left, leaving the people from the four major families to daydream. They imagined how the thin elder in the portrait in the ancestral hall of their family looked in reality. He was undoubtedly the most powerful cultivator in the world. If I can't see our ancestor once in this life, I, Bai Zizong, will regret it for the rest of my life. Bai Zizong, who had been standing in silence for a long time, suddenly said while gritting his teeth. Bai Shan let out a long sigh and said, "It's not easy to see our ancestor. Didn't you hear what your father said? The great ancestor was the punishment enforcer of the demon ghost realm and lived in the center of the demon ghost realm. Even if you were at the end of the tribulation transcendent stage, you would not be able to go deep into the demon ghost realm, let alone the place where the great ancestor lived. If you really want to go, the only way is to rely on Yu Qianqiu. If Yu Qianqiu is willing to introduce you, it shouldn't be a big problem." Bai Zizong suddenly turned his head and said, "Third uncle, if Li Cheng and the other three could be personally taught by our ancestor, once we succeed in our cultivation, we would be able to learn 1/100th of our ancestor's abilities. Who in the Chinese cultivation world would dare to make things difficult for us? I don't understand why the old ancestor would not care about his own descendants and instead accept an outsider as a personal disciple. Could it be that none of us descendants can enter the old ancestor's eyes?" This sudden statement stunned the people of the four families. Tan Fei, Wu Liqing, and Jingzhou all breathed rapidly. Needless to say, it would be beneficial to be taught by the great ancestor of the world's #1 expert. When the four heirs thought of the extraordinary purple dress following beside Yu Qianqiu, their expressions became a little strange. "How dare you?" Bai Shan suddenly shouted. "Bai Zizong, are you out of your mind? How can the great ancestor's thoughts be guessed by ordinary people? The great ancestor must have his own reasons for doing this. It's not something you can comment on." "Third uncle, don't tell me you still don't understand." Bai Zizong pointed in the direction where the two of them went and said angrily, "Was the hidden force behind him? Could he really comprehend such a mysterious and strange technique by himself? Who gave him those two treasured sabers? Without a doubt, all of these were given to him by the great ancestor. Otherwise, how could a lowly disciple like him surpass our cultivation base in such a short period of time? He dares to do whatever he wants in the cultivation world because he has the great ancestor's support. I don't understand why the great ancestor would do this. Jealousy always makes people lose their minds easily. When Yu Qianqiu was just a lowly disciple, Bai Shan could still bow down to him. Now, Yu Qianqiu was higher than him in every aspect. Even his seniority was higher than him. When he saw that Zi was obedient to Yu Qianqiu's words, an unknown fire completely ignited the dissatisfaction in his heart. Although Wu Liqing and the other two had similar thoughts, they never had such strong feelings. They were stunned by Zizong's words. They did not expect Bai Zizong to say something like this. Tan Huazong, Jing Xingping, and Wu Anfeng looked at each other. Bai Shan was trembling with anger. He pointed his finger and yelled, "Bastard, kneel down." Bai Zizong clenched his teeth and kneeled in front of Bai Shan. His expression showed his unwillingness. Bai Shan said bitterly, "Without the great ancestor, there would be no from major clans. Jealousy blinds your eyes. You can't achieve anything. How dare you talk about the great ancestor's right and wrong? Do you think you're qualified to take over the Bai clan in the future? You treacherous bastard. Slap yourself." Slap, slap, slap. Bai Zizong slapped his own mouth without saying anything. He slapped his own mouth again and again. Wu Liqing and the other two did not know what to do. Tan Huazong and the other two quickly advised, "Brother Bai, it's enough to teach him a lesson. It's understandable for a young man to say something rash. You don't have to go overboard. Bai Zitsung, who was slapping himself, suddenly stopped. He touched his face, shook his head, and smiled bitterly. He kowtowed to Bai Shan and said, "Third uncle, I know I'm wrong. I was blinded by jealousy just now and said something rash. Please forgive me." The few of them were speechless by his sudden change. Yin Bugue and the Cultivation Alliance's challenge location was in a mountain not too far away from the Hundred Flowers Valley. To be exact, it should be in a valley surrounded by mountains. It took some effort to choose this place. People could stand around and watch, and the spacious valley in the middle was just right for the fight. There were probably thousands of people on the surrounding mountains. This was the result of the sects restraining their disciples. Otherwise, there would be more people coming to watch the fight. On Yin Bugue's side, there were about 50 people, including himself. From their clothes, most of them were cultivators from other clans. These dozens of people stood on the mountain top, facing the many cultivators, but they did not show any fear. It was as if they were looking down on the cultivators of China. Both sides had already sent people to the middle to discuss the start of the fight. Ever since Yanbu Gue found out that Yu Qianshou was among the crowd on the opposite mountaintop, his eyes rarely moved, filled with hatred. If it wasn't for this guy, his family wouldn't be in such an awkward situation. The husband and wife couldn't be together. They colluded with other clans to protect themselves, and even their sect became enemies. Now that they had reached a point where it was either win or die, there was no way out. How could Yu Qianshou not notice Yanbu Gue, who was the center of attention? Seeing that he kept staring at him, he didn't want to compete with Yanbu Gue with his stare, but it was uncomfortable to be stared at like that. He looked around and found the position of the 10,000 demons. They were not far away, so he slowly walked to the side of Chiu Wen and bowed. "Greetings, Senior Chiu." Greetings, greetings, greetings." Chiu Yuen looked him up and down. When did this guy become so proactive? It seemed like he was always the one looking for him first. Therefore, with a stomach full of questions, he asked, "Brother Yu, are you looking for me?" The 10,000 demons also looked at him. "Huh, nothing. Yu Qianshou looked around with a face full of smiles. The weather today is really good. The 10,000 demons were not in a good mood. None of them were happy that the son of the previous sect leader had caused such trouble. Thinking about the possibility of fighting him again, they felt even more depressed. At this moment, Yu Qianshou came over to talk about the weather. The group looked at the sky and felt that it was normal. They didn't notice anything special, but they suspected that there was a deeper meaning behind his words. They were all confused. "Are you really okay?" Chiu Wen asked doubtfully. I'm fine. Yu Qianshou confirmed it again. Then, he was too lazy to talk nonsense beside Chiu Wen. He seemed to be chatting happily with the 10,000 demons from time to time, creating a harmonious atmosphere. The 10,000 demons reluctantly answered him. They didn't have the mood to talk nonsense with him now. But when this scene fell into the eyes of Yin Bugue, who was on the opposite mountain, he was so disgusted that he almost broke his teeth from gritting them. What the hell is this guy doing? Chiu Yuen cursed silently. The more Yu Qianshou said that he was fine, the more suspicious he became. He and Yu Qianshou had known each other for a long time. At that time, Yu Qianshou hadn't joined Fushin Island yet. Once they met, Yu Qianshou started to flatter Chiu Yuen. Chiu Yuen already knew that this guy wasn't a good person. What happened later also confirmed his guess. Now that he suddenly acted like this, Chiu Yuen started to look around suspiciously. When his eyes met the hateful eyes on the opposite mountain, he was stunned. Then, he understood everything. This guy was obviously using the 10,000 demons to make Yin Bugue angry. He was vicious. Chiu Wen looked at Yu Qianshou, who was still talking nonsense with the 10,000 demons. His expression changed. He said in a low voice, "Yu Qianshou, you've achieved your goal. Go back to your position." Senior Chiu, what do you mean by that? Yu Qianshou pretended to be confused. "Please go back." Chiu Yuen raised his hand and said bluntly. The dignified Myriad Demon's Palace, the leader of the demonic path, had been used by this fellow like a bunch of blind people. How could they possibly have the nerve to explain themselves so clearly? Yu Qianzhou's expression darkened. He said in a cold voice, "It seems that I'm not welcome in the 10,000 demons. I originally wanted to shamelessly ask to join the 10,000 demons after the competition. That's why I came here to get in touch with you guys. It seems that I was thinking too much. Oomph. Elder Qiu, please help me thank Palace Leader Bu for inviting me in person. It's not that I don't know what's good for me, but the threshold to join the 10,000 demons is too high. Yu Qianzhou, can't cross it. Goodbye." He waved his hand and walked away. The 10,000 demons looked at Qiu Weiyuan in surprise. For someone like Yu Qianzhou, who had mysterious skills and a spiritual treasure, the 10,000 demons couldn't wait to recruit him. "Why did you chase him away?" One of the late tribulation cultivators who rushed here overnight asked in a low voice. "Qiu Weiyuan, what's going on?" Qiu Weiyuan was speechless. He thought to himself, "Did I really think too much and misunderstand? If this guy really wants to join the 10,000 demons, then I..." Chapter 391. Some people who were paying attention to Yu Qianzhou saw him strolling to the 10,000 demon side and chatting happily with the top demonic factions people. But for some reason, he came back with a long face. The people from the four clans looked at each other. He stared at him for a while and finally couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong?" Yu Qianzhou expressionlessly said, "Nothing. I just solved a small problem." He frowned. Why was he still unhappy after solving the problem? She wasn't a talkative person, so she didn't ask. She followed everyone's gaze to the valley. The challenge was about to begin. Both sides seemed to have reached an agreement. Each side handed over 1 billion spirit stones to a middleman, the 10,000 demons. Right now, the only middleman that could be accepted by both sides was the 10,000 demons. Everything that needed to be prepared was ready, so there was nothing to be said. There wasn't even anyone to judge. It seemed that this kind of battle to the death didn't need anyone to judge. The rules had already been set. Apart from the people who escaped from the valley, the rest had no other choice. One of them died, and the other lived. It was easy to determine the winner and loser. However, once they went on stage, the possibility of them escaping was very low. No sect could afford to lose face like this. They would definitely punish the people who escaped after the battle. The top 10 sects of the righteous and demonic sects had already gathered their experts, especially the supporting Immortal Island. They had 2 experts at the final stage of the Tribulation Passing Stage and 10 experts at the Tribulation Passing Stage from the Cultivation Pavilion. Donfang Chang Ao was one of them. It was obvious that the supporting Immortal Island was complacent and wanted to use this challenge to prove their position as the top sect in the world. The 10,000 demons, the leader of the demonic faction, was destined to be unable to compete with the supporting Immortal Island in this matter. Those who knew a little about the cultivation world knew that the supporting Immortal Island was in the hands of the Guan clan, while the 10,000 demons were in the hands of the Yin clan. Yin Bugui was the only son of the 10,000 demons' previous leader Yin Wuchen and the current leader, Bu Yunxiao's senior brother. If Yin Wuchen didn't die, the 10,000 demons wouldn't dare to do anything to him. After the spirit stones were handed over, the valley quieted down. There was only the sound of the mountain wind. Everyone was looking around, not knowing who would be the first to challenge, and who would be the first to accept the challenge. Damn, what were they waiting for? Yu Qianzhou looked around, wishing he could go up first. Unfortunately, his cultivation level was too low. If he went up first, his opponent's cultivation levels would be above the crossing tribulation stage. According to the rules, they wouldn't be able to challenge him, so going up first would be pointless. According to the rules, those with high cultivation bases could not challenge those with low cultivation bases, while those with low cultivation bases could challenge those with high cultivation bases. However, it seemed that the possibility of the second scenario happening was very low, because it was practically courting death. China's cultivation world didn't know much about the foreign cultivation world, so the sects wanted to send someone to explore the world first before making a move. Yin Bugui, on the other hand, knew the situation of China's cultivation world very well. He wanted to see who would go first before sending someone to deal with the challenge. This was one of the reasons why he was determined to win. The mentality of both sides caused a temporary stalemate. Yu Qianshou decided to wait a little longer when he thought about the possibility of earning 50 million. If no one went up, he would let Zi go. At this moment, Dongfang Chang Ao of the supporting Immortal Island slowly took out a golden spear from his storage bag, attracting everyone's attention. It seemed like the supporting Immortal Island was going to be the first to fight. The supporting Immortal Island was known as the top sect in the world. It might not matter to other sects if this stalemate continued, but the supporting Immortal Island couldn't do this because it was the top sect in the world. Dongfang Chang Ao had been representing the image of the supporting Immortal Island for a long time, so he had to fight first. It's him again. Yu Qianshou stared at Dongfang Chang Ao with a trace of pity in his eyes. He couldn't help but sigh. Dongfang Chang Ao was simply a desperate man of the supporting Immortal Island. He was always at the forefront. Sigh. Heroes would eventually reach their twilight, and even a fine horse would stumble. If this went on, he was destined to become a tragic figure. A figure flashed, and Dongfang Chang Ao was already standing in the middle of the valley. The luxurious grass covered him up to his knees. He held his spear and shouted, "Middle stage tribulation passing cultivator of the supporting Immortal Island, Dongfang Chang Ao accepts the challenge. Who wants to die?" His last sentence was especially sonorous, and his voice echoed in the valley for a long time. "Good," someone shouted. Everyone looked toward the source of the voice and saw Yu Qianshou taking the lead in clapping and clamoring. Everyone was slightly stunned. Someone from the Cultivation Alliance immediately followed suit. Then, the cheers and applause were continuous, and the atmosphere was immediately livened up. Yu Qianshou didn't mean anything else. First of all, there was finally someone to light up the fire. Second of all, Dongfang Chang Ao was a real man in his heart. The applause and cheers were not wrong for him. He looked at Yu Qianshou in surprise. She didn't expect the crowd to have such a big reaction. Driven by the atmosphere, she couldn't help but applaud. Wu Liqing and the other two looked at Bai Zizong. Bai Zizong smiled bitterly at them and applauded. Dongfang Chang Ao tilted his head and looked at Yu Qianshou. He nodded and thanked him. It was enough for a man to be cheered by another man for something that he had held onto for his whole life. In the end, he met Xiao Weiyuan of the 10,000 Demons. These two represented the leaders of the righteous and evil sects. For the glory of their sects, they fought for everything and never gave in. Xiao Weiyuan looked at Dongfang Chang Ao with an inexplicable expression. He sighed slightly and looked away. This was the first time he gave in to Dongfang Chang Ao. Only the two of them could understand that kind of feeling. Yu Qianshou's atmosphere was getting stronger. Dongfang Chang Ao's fighting spirit increased. He suddenly turned around and pointed at Yanbu Gui and the others on a mountain. He shouted, "Dongfang Chang Ao is here. Who wants to fight me?" Good. This time, there was no need for anyone to take the lead. The crowd had already pushed the applause and cheers to the climax. Yanbu Gui retracted his resentful gaze from Yu Qianshou. He looked around and snorted coldly. He slowly walked in front of a person and said in a deep voice, "Mr. Yin, I'm sure you've heard of this person. He could be considered a famous figure in Fushin Island. His golden sword spear is an upper-grade magical treasure. He rarely has a match. Although your cultivation is similar to his, and the black dragon whip in your hand can more or less restrain the spear, don't underestimate him. I'll leave this battle to you. I've long wanted to meet this person." The cultivator called Mr. Yin chuckled. He gently pulled on a long black whip that was tied to his naked upper body, and it smoothly slid into his hand before coiling into a bundle. He swept down from the mountain and stood about 10 meters away from Dongfang Chang Ao. He chuckled and said, "Shoshui country's tribulation-passing middle-stage cultivator, Yin Biao, is here to challenge you." As soon as he arrived, the surrounding area immediately quieted down. All eyes were focused on the two of them. When Dongfang Chang Ao saw the whip in Yin Biao's hand, he slightly raised his eyebrows. He raised his spear and shouted, "Foreign cultivator, how dare you mess with the Chinese cultivation world? Die!" The spear turned into a phantom and smashed down. Dongfang Chong Ao made the first move. With a loud boom, a long, deep hole appeared on the ground. The air wave sent the surrounding weeds flying. Yin Biao couldn't be hit just like that. He had already disappeared. I've long heard of Dongfang Chong Ao's great name. Now that I see it, you're so clumsy. The voice came from the sky. Yin Biao stopped in the air. The long whip in his hand had already been released. It was like a spirit snake flying in the air. It was extremely nimble. The people of the Cultivation Alliance were shocked. The Chinese cultivation world was good at using flying swords, but this was the first time they had seen someone using a whip. The two late-stage tribulation passing elders of Fushin Island were called Jin Yin and Fan Benlei. Their faces revealed a faint trace of worry. The whip could restrain the spear. In addition, it could be used like a sword. They were afraid that Dongfang Chong Ao would be in danger. Dongfang Chong Ao didn't even raise his head. He straightened his spear and pierced the sky. Whoosh! A golden light shot out from the spearhead and shot toward Yin Biao. While Yin Biao was speaking, his hands were already forming messy hand seals. The long black whip coiled up in the air. The raised whip head was pitch black like a cone, as if it was refined from a beast's horn or tooth. When the golden light shot over, Yin Biao didn't dodge. He pointed his finger, and the long whip whizzed out. The cone-like whip head directly collided with the golden light. Bang! A wave of air exploded. The golden light shot out from the spear was instantly defeated in the air. The long whip, however, shot toward Dongfang Chao like an arrow. Everyone watching was shocked by the sharpness of the whip. At the same time, they were worried for the person below. Dongfang Changyao raised his head and took a glance. Then he shot into the sky and swung his spear horizontally. With a pong sound, he directly knocked away the whip and raised his spear to chase after Yin Biao in the sky. The latter smiled ferociously. He raised his hand and pointed. Dongfang Chong Ao suddenly felt that something was wrong. He quickly glanced his left and right. Suddenly, he heard a whoosh sound coming from behind him. He looked back and saw that the whip that he had just knocked away was coming again. Bang! He turned around and raised his spear to knock the whip away again. But the whip was just knocked away. It bounced in the air and came back to life. In the blink of an eye, it wrapped around him again. Dongfang Chong Ao didn't have time to care about Yin Biao. He waved his spear and fought with the strange whip. On the other hand, Yin Biao, who was in the air, only needed to control the whip with ease. Dongfang Chong Ao was already at a disadvantage. If this continued, he would consume too much of his true essence. If his reaction was a little slow, he was afraid that he would be at a disadvantage. Yu Qianqiu could see that Dongfang Chong Ao wasn't really inferior to that guy. The key was that the guy's whip was too strange. It couldn't be killed or broken. It was really entangled. Dongfang Chong Ao couldn't display his strength at all. Damn it, no one knew what would happen next. Losing one more round might decide the outcome of the battle. This was related to the ownership of 1 billion yuan. I've invested 40 million yuan. I can't lose money no matter what. Yu Qianqiu frowned. He suddenly turned to Baishan and asked, if someone threw a treasure down the mountain and happened to be picked up by Dongfang Changyao, it wouldn't be against the rules, right? Baishan looked at him in shock. He didn't know what he meant. Chapter 392. The people at the side immediately reacted and thought of his two unusually sharp sabers. Could it be that he wanted to throw his sabers out for Dongfang Chong Ao to use? It seemed that the sabers could not be taken away by others. Baishan pondered for a moment and said, if someone accidentally drops something down the mountain, as long as they don't interfere with the battle, it shouldn't be considered a violation of the rules as to who picked it up and who used it. Accidentally? Yu Qianqiu looked at Baishan and laughed, thinking to himself that this guy really knew how to talk. Looking back at the battle site, the crackling sounds echoed in the valley. Dongfang Changyao was still entangled with the whip. Whether it was the spear in his hand that was sharp enough to provoke or smash, it could not hurt the whip at all. Needless to say, to be able to resist the spear in Dongfang Chong Ao's hand. This whip must be an upper-grade magical weapon. The whip was strong and flexible in the air. The head and tail of the whip coordinated with each other to attack. As soon as the tip of the whip was knocked away by the spear, the tail of the whip pierced through the air, causing Dongfang Chang'o to be extremely busy. It was as if he was in a muddy pond, unable to escape and unable to use his strength. He did not even have the chance to fight with Yin Biao. However, it was not easy for the whip to hit Dongfang Chang'o, at least under the situation where Dongfang Chang'o could still sustain his energy consumption. No matter how fierce the whip's attack was, it could not get close to him. However, Yin Biao was still smiling as he looked at Dongfang Chang'o, who was entangled with the whip. He was very leisurely making hand seals. Great! Yin Bugui and the others at the mountaintop also applauded and cheered. If this continued, they would definitely win the first round. The people of the Cultivation Alliance did not look too good, especially those from supporting Xian Island. Losing the first battle would not only affect the Huaxia cultivation world and supporting Xian Island, but also Dongfang Chang'o would have to live in seclusion on supporting Xian Island for a long time. He would never be able to represent supporting Xian Island again. Hearing the arrogant shouts coming from the other side, Dongfang Chang'o was enraged. He knew what it would mean if he lost this battle. Therefore, with a red face, he let out a loud shout, then consumed a great deal of Zhen Yuan to continuously shoot out a sharp golden light from the spearhead. Finally, he managed to force the snake-like whip to retreat for a while. His bloodshot eyes glared at the sky, and Dongfang Chang'o seized the chance to quickly raise his spear and charge forward. Yin Biao was shocked. Actually, he himself was clearly aware that if he didn't rely on the sharpness of his whip, his strength would probably be much inferior to his opponent. Now that his opponent had not completely fallen into a hopeless situation, he ignored the rapid consumption of Zhen Yuan and escaped. He didn't have any magical treasures in his hands. Once his opponent caught up with him, wouldn't it be a dead end? He quickly made hand seals to recall the Black Dragon Whip, and his body also quickly dodged. The golden light from Dongfang Chang'o's spear barely brushed past his feet, and Yin Biao was immediately scared out of his wits. What a fast speed! His opponent's strength was indeed a notch higher than his. Just a little bit more, and he would have lost both his feet. Yin Bugui and the others were also shocked. Since his opponent had dodged, he had already lost the chance to chase after him. The long whip had already caught up with him, and Dongfang Chang'o was once again trapped in the shadow of the whip. He also understood that once the counterattack just now failed, his opponent would not give him a chance to suddenly get close to him again. The sudden change in the situation made the Cultivation Alliance's morale rise. They didn't expect that they would still fail, and their hearts fell to the bottom again. How could everyone not see that Dongfang Chang'o probably had no chance to win anymore? And now it was just a battle of attrition. Countless people shook their heads in pity for Dongfang Chang'o. He was obviously strong, but he was tormented by a whip until he couldn't use his strength. They were afraid that the outcome was already decided. Qiuwen of the 10,000 demons had been staring at the figure entangled by the whip in midair. His eyes were wide open, and they were also bloodshot. His fists were clenched so tightly that there was a muffled sound, and his chest was heaving up and down violently. His opponent of many years might die in such an unjust battle. He suddenly felt that there was a stuffiness in his chest that he couldn't breathe out, and he was about to suffocate to death. He didn't know why either. The situation was grim. It's time to negotiate. Dongfang Chang'o, you'll have to fight one more time. Yu Qianqiu pursed his lips. While everyone was watching with rapt attention, he walked out swaggeringly and slowly walked to the side of the people from supporting Xian Island. There was still someone in the mood to stroll at this time, and it naturally attracted many people's attention. It was this guy again. Previously, he went to the 10,000 demons side, and this time, he came to supporting Xian Island's side. What was he trying to do? Yu Qianqiu didn't say anything. The mountain was a little sloped, and he stood under the eyes of the people from supporting Xian Island, silently watching Dongfang Chang'o brandishing his long whip. The people from supporting Cien Island looked at each other, not knowing what this guy was doing here at this time. Quan Deming was currently the representative here, and he couldn't help but ask, Yu Qianshou, what's the matter? Yu Qianshou looked back in a daze, and then looked left and right as if he had accidentally walked here. He immediately walked up and moved to Quan Deming's side, cupped his fist slightly, and said, Elder Quan, I have something to ask. I noticed that Elder Dongfang's strength is obviously stronger than Yin Biao, but his spear is restrained by that long whip. I have something I don't understand. Don't you have any treasures that can break this long whip? If you do, why not throw into the battlefield now? As long as you don't interfere with the duel, it won't be against the rules. Quan Deming turned around to look at the two consecrators behind him and frowned. I don't know what this whip is made of, but it's soft and not strenuous at all. It's not something that can be countered by ordinary treasures, unless there's an exceptionally sharp treasure that can break it in one fell swoop. It's not that our supporting Cien Island doesn't have such treasures, but they aren't in our hands at the moment, and it's too late to go back and get them. At this point, Quan Deming suddenly stopped talking, and everyone from supporting Cien Island also looked at Yu Qianshou. Speaking of the sharpness of treasures, who had seen a treasure sharper than Yu Qianshou's sabers? Even the sword of the Luo Sect master was easily cut into 3 pieces, so it shouldn't be a problem to deal with this whip. Everyone's eyes lit up, but they immediately remembered that not everyone could pick up the sabers. Dongfang Chang'ao had also tried, but he couldn't pick it up at all. Thinking about it was a waste of time, and everyone shook their heads in regret. Yu Qianshou nodded, and he rubbed his chin as he muttered, Speaking of spears, I do have a treasure spear here. Although it's not as strong as my sabers, its sharpness isn't inferior to the sabers, and it might even be better. I just don't know if it can break this long whip. He wasn't afraid that people from other sects would hear him, because if someone released their divine senses to listen in, they would be discovered by supporting Cien Island. His words were no less than a sweet bait, and everyone's eyes lit up. There was actually a treasure spear that was sharper than his sabers, so how could it not break the long whip? Quan Deming was astounded, and he asked, Yu Qianshou, is what you said true? Yu Qianshou silently turned around, and he frowned. Elder Quan, this isn't the first time we've met, so when have you seen me lie? His tone was a little unhappy. That's not what I meant. Quan Deming explained. What I meant was, can you take out your treasure spear and let's take a look at it? Yu Qianshou looked at the situation of the battle, and he reckoned that Dongfang Chang'o would be able to hold on for a while longer. Thus, he shook his head and sighed. I have a few good treasures with me, and they were all given to me by a senior. He once told me that unless it's an emergency, I can't simply show these treasures to others, and I can't give them to others to use without permission. I've already promised him, so it's not convenient for me to break my promise. May I know which senior it is? Why don't you tell us? Perhaps he has a good relationship with supporting Cien Island, Quan Deming said. He has been in seclusion for many years, so I'm afraid you won't know him. Yu Qianshou thought of a person, and he casually made up a story, Nanming Old Ancestor. While Quan Deming was still thinking, the 2 consecrators at the end of the tribulation passing stage behind him exclaimed, What? It's him. Yu Qianshou was slightly stunned. F*CK. I blow my trumpet. There's really someone in supporting Cien Island who knows Nanming Old Ancestor? Quan Deming turned around and bowed. Consecrators, is there really such a person? Why haven't I heard of him before? Jin Yin said with a solemn expression, It's normal that you haven't heard of him. This person was a person from over 1,000 years ago, and he was a wandering cultivator who hid in the cultivation world. Over 1,000 years ago, when the sect leader of supporting Cien Island went out for a tour, he coincidentally met an expert at the end of the tribulation passing stage. Not only was this person's cultivation level profound, but he was also a top-notch expert in smithing. His smithing skills were simply extraordinary and wonderful. Sect leader Run wanted to befriend him, but the other party was unwilling to acknowledge him. In the end, sect leader Ren asked for his name, but the other party only said Nanming Old Ancestor and left. After that, supporting Xian Island sent people to secretly investigate this Nanming old ancestor, but it's a pity that we didn't have the chance to meet him again. That's right. Fan Benlei nodded and said, most people don't even know about this. I've only seen it in the secret records of Nurturing Heart Pavilion. According to Sect leader Ren's description, with the smithing skills of that Nanming old ancestor, it shouldn't be difficult for him to forge a treasure spear. But this was already a matter from over 1,000 years ago. If this person is really still alive, then wouldn't he be over 1,000 years old? When everyone heard this, they immediately thought of a possibility. If that person was still alive, wouldn't his cultivation level have already reached the legendary soul formation stage? Think about it. Even if Yu Qianshou was spouting nonsense, it couldn't be so coincidental. Putting aside the fact that the name was the same, to be able to take out such a treasure, wouldn't it coincide with the secret of Nanming old ancestor being a smithing expert? Like I said, I've only heard of this Nanming old ancestor from Healy. How could you possibly know him? Yu Qianshou's brows moved slightly, and he suddenly sighed and said, your sect leader really missed the opportunity to meet Nanming old ancestor. This Nanming old ancestor, he loves spirit stones. If supporting Xian Island sect leader Ren could lure him with spirit stones, it wouldn't be difficult to make him stay on your supporting Xian Island. Sigh, he did give me some treasures, but it's a pity that he forced me to search for spirit stones for him. I'm really worried to death. If Nanming old ancestor really heard this, he would probably jump in anger. Who said I love spirit stones? I don't even know who Yu Qianshou, are. When did I force you to search for spirit stones? Chapter 393. Ancestor Nanming liked spirit stones? The people of supporting Immortals Island finally understood why Yu Qianshou and the purple-clothed lady were so frantically accumulating wealth after their appearance. It turned out that there was an inside story. Jin Yin and Fan Benlei looked at each other. While Yu Qianshou was looking at the duel in midair, they gave Quan Deming a look. Quan Deming nodded his head in understanding. He turned to Yu Qianshou and said, Yu Qianshou, can we borrow that spear for a while? Yu Qianshou paused and said with some difficulty, I know what you mean. You want to borrow the spear for Elder Dongfang to use, but I promised Ancestor Nanming that I can't easily take out the treasures he bestowed, and I can't let others use them without permission. Otherwise, it's very likely that he will take them back. Elder Quan, you have to know that I'm prepared to use these treasures to save my life at a critical moment. If they were to be taken back, what would I do when I encounter danger in the future? Most importantly, I've always kept my promises. You guys better think of another way. We can pay spirit stones to rent it from Ancestor Nanming. What do you think? Quan Deming said. Yu Qianshou smiled bitterly and said, Elder Quan, it's not that I don't want to promise you, but Ancestor is at the ends of the earth. Even if you rent it from him, I'm afraid that by the time you get the news that he agrees, it'll be too late. Do you think it's still necessary? Can you make this decision on behalf of Ancestor Nanming? Quan Deming asked. Me? Yu Qianshou pointed at himself and then fell silent. He seemed to be thinking about something in the silence. After a while, he nodded, but then he shook his head and said, as long as there are spirit stones, I can make the decision. But you guys don't know Ancestor Nanming's character. He won't care about a small amount. His appetite is a little big. It was unknown whether he was feeling guilty when he said this. Was it the Nanming ancestor whom he had never met that had a huge appetite? Or was it him who had a huge appetite? Quan Deming glanced at Dongfang Chong Ao, who was fighting in grief and indignation. With a firm expression, he said, name a number that the Nanming ancestor can accept. As long as it's not too outrageous, we won't make things difficult for you. The greatest significance of supporting Immortal Island's first appearance was not to win spirit stones, but to save face. For the #1 sect in the world, reputation was sometimes more important than spirit stones. Z, E, and the people from the 4 major clans were no longer in the mood to watch the fight. From time to time, they would look at the people from supporting Xian Island. They didn't know what Yu Qianshou was doing with the people from supporting Xian Island. He kept talking nonstop. As for Bai Zizong and the other three who were standing at the back, their gazes often stopped on the graceful silhouette of the lady in purple in front of them, sinking deeper and deeper. Yuan Jiukuei from the Six Paths Demon Sect had questioned the disciple who was beaten yesterday, but that disciple refused to admit that he spat on Yu Qianqiu. As a result, Yuan Jiukuei's hateful gaze couldn't leave Yu Qianqiu today. Now that he had finished visiting the 10,000 Demons side, he went to the supporting Xian Island side. At first, he thought that this kid was really capable to be able to win over both the righteous and demonic sections. But now, he felt that something was wrong. Yuan Jiukuei looked at the scene doubtfully. Dongfang Chang Ao was in imminent danger, but the people from supporting Xian Island were busy chatting with Yu Qianqiu. Even the two consecrators in the final stage of the tribulation passing realm were hitting on him. This was like seeing a ghost. Could it be that supporting Xian Island wasn't worried about Dongfang Chang's safety at all? Impossible. Dongfang Chang Ao represented the face of supporting Xian Island. This huge doubt made Yuan Jiukuei feel as if he had been enlightened. He couldn't help but regret his impulsive actions yesterday. Supporting Xian Island and the 10,000 demons were not kind people. Since the two sects and Yu Qianqiu were so accommodating, they must know something that others didn't. It seemed like he had to spend more effort to investigate. Otherwise, it would be too late to regret when he suffered loss. Yu Qianqiu lowered his head and pondered when he heard this. He thought to himself, I've played hard to get, so I'm not going to play anymore. Not only will they not believe me, they will also say that I'm greedy. It's not good to play too much. It'll be bad if I lose everything. So he let out a sigh and nodded solemnly. Okay, since Elder Quan has already put it this way, I'll brace up my courage and make a decision on behalf of Ancestor Nanming. A fixed price of 50 million high-grade spiritual stones is really the lowest I can go. Ancestor Nanming really won't be interested in anything less than this. You can decide for yourselves. It would cost 50 million just to rent it. Even if supporting a mortal island saved up this amount of money, it would still take many years. The people of supporting Xian Island looked at each other, but they couldn't delay any longer. Dongfang Chang's safety and supporting Xian Island's face were worth more than 50 million. Jin Yin said in a deep voice, Yu Qianqiu, I promise you on behalf of supporting Xian Island. However, I have to say something first. What if the spear isn't as sharp as you said, and we make a mistake? I've never lied. Is Senior doubting my credibility? Fine, I'll risk the treasure being taken back by Ancestor Nanming. I'll say this here. If the spear's sharpness isn't what I said, you don't have to give me a single spiritual stone. Yu Qianqiu's face was full of righteousness, and his words were filled with awe-inspiring righteousness. Jin Yin nodded. All right, it's settled then. However, we don't have that many spiritual stones on us, so we'll have to temporarily— Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and interrupted him. It's fine to give it to you after the matter is over. I've been on supporting Xian Island for so many years, so I have some confidence in supporting Xian Island. However, I have to make it clear in advance that the spear can't be used by you indefinitely. It's only for Elder Dongfang's match. Supporting Xian Island had never thought of taking his things. Moreover, since Yu Qianqiu was so straightforward, Jin Yin immediately agreed. All right, let's use the spear. I have to remind everyone that Ancestor Nanming is afraid that people will pry into the secrets of the treasures he refined, so he set up extremely powerful restrictions on them. I've asked him to set up the same restrictions on my 2 treasured sabers, so you must not use your divine senses to check them. Once your divine senses come into contact with them, they'll be immediately damaged, Yu Qianqiu warned. Everyone from supporting Xian Island was astonished. It turned out that the reason why the 2 sabers could hurt people's divine senses was because of the restrictions. There was actually such a powerful restriction in this world. That Ancestor Nanming really wasn't someone an ordinary person could compare to. After everyone agreed, Yu Qianqiu put his hand into his storage bag. After searching for a while, he suddenly muttered strangely, "Could it be that I forgot to bring it with me? That's impossible." When everyone heard this, they almost fainted. After wasting so much time talking, he actually said that he forgot to bring it with him. Jin Yin's face was ashen as he said, "You Qianshou, are you kidding me? Look carefully." "Oh, I found it, Yu Qianshou shouted. He didn't mean to dawdle, but the huge sabers that he made with his black flames were a little too crude. This time, since he was pretending to be the spear refined by ancestor Nanming, he naturally had to look like a treasure spear. Otherwise, if they were all crudely made, it would be strange if they didn't suspect that they came from the same family. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to fool them even if he wanted to. Thus, after some preparation, he put his hand into his storage bag and used his black flames to carefully suppress it. That was why he spent some time. Everyone from supporting Xian Island's gaze followed Yu Qianshou's hand as it slowly moved. This action instantly attracted the attention of everyone on the surrounding mountains. What were those fellows from supporting Xian Island doing? Dongfang Chang Ao was fighting with his life on the line. Could it be that they still had the mood to do something else? The spear's tail that was slowly pulled out was black. It was formed by two malevolent beast claws, and the fine scales on the claws were vivid and lifelike. The spear's tail had just been revealed when a terrifying feeling of deterrence emanated from the storage bag. Yu Qianshou suddenly pulled out the spear and casually inserted it into the ground beside him. With a pu sound, even the spear's tail could easily be inserted into the mountain rocks. The spear's body was about 2 meters long, and it was completely black. The spear's shaft was as thick as a child's arm, and it looked like it was covered in scales. Upon closer inspection, it turned out that there were 9 angry dragon carvings bearing their fangs and brandishing their claws. They looked as if they were about to leap out of the spear's shaft. From the front, the spear's blade looked like a flat dragon head opening its mouth and roaring angrily at the sky. The spear's blade had broken through the dragon's fangs and emerged from the dragon's open mouth. On top of the original 2-meter-long spear's body, there was a sharp edge that was half a meter long. The center of the spear bulged out while the edges were thin, and it even carried a dense barb. The spear's entire body was pitch black, and it didn't reflect any light in the sunlight. It was truly a mystery what it had been forged from. The moment this spear appeared, the people from supporting Xian Island felt like they had to retreat before even trying it out, and they couldn't help but gasp. Needless to say, just this meticulous carving and this concealed aura meant that this was undoubtedly a treasured spear. The people standing closer to the spear could clearly see the fierce spearhead and were left speechless. Those farther away were also trying to figure it out. Yu Qianshou examined the spear's design and was very satisfied with it. In his rush, just now, he had recalled the image of the red dragon in Twilight Valley and applied it to this spear. As expected, the spear's aura was extraordinary. How could he not praise such a masterpiece? Yu Qianshou coughed and solemnly said, "When this spear first took shape, someone used it to kill a 9,000-year-old flood dragon that was on the verge of ascending. Afterwards, the Southbright ancestor placed 9 dragons on the spear's body, calling it the dragon-slaying spear. The dragon slayer who used this spear once praised that the supreme cultivator's treasured spear slays dragons. No one in the world dares to disobey, and the heavenly sword does not appear." The dragon-slaying spear? This spear once slaughtered a flood dragon that was on the verge of ascending. Fan Benlei said in disbelief. The people from supporting Xian Island also stared at the spear, and Jin Yin asked in shock, "The heavenly sword does not appear, and who can contend with it? Does this mean that there is another heavenly spear that can contend with the dragon-slaying spear?" That heavenly sword refers to the heavenly sword, not the spear, but it's also incredibly sharp, Yu Qianshou somewhat awkwardly explained. He thought to himself, "I can't talk nonsense anymore. If I continue, Great Hero Jin will be so angry that he transmigrates to settle the score with me." He quickly changed the topic and said, "Everyone, shouldn't you quickly hand the spear over to Elder Dongfang? If we continue to talk, I'm afraid there will be a problem." Everyone was shocked when they heard this. Only now did they remember that they were only looking at the spear, and they neglected the desperate Dongfang Chang Ao. Jin Yin and Fan Benlei nodded at Quan Deming at the same time. Quan Deming grabbed the spear and instantly felt a bone-piercing cold. He couldn't help but praise, "Good spear." Everyone stepped aside, and Quan Deming walked out with the spear in hand. He transmitted his voice to Dongfang Chong Ao, "Elder Dongfang, don't panic. We have already found you the peerless godly weapon dragon-slaying spear. It will definitely be able to break that strange whip. You must remember, the restriction on this spear is extremely powerful. As long as you don't use your divine sense to check, you will definitely be able to use it safely." Chapter 394. Dongfang Chong Ao, who was trying his best to deal with Quan Deming, took the opportunity to take a glance. When he saw that Quan Deming was indeed holding a black spear in his hand, his spirit was lifted, but he was a little confused. He was good at using spears, so he paid more attention to all kinds of good spears. Where did the dragon-slaying spear come from? Why hadn't he heard of it before? When Yanbu Gue saw the spear in Quan Deming's hand, his expression changed immediately. He could guess what was going to happen next. He transmitted a message to Yin Biao. "Be careful, Mr. Yin. Supporting Xian Island is going to send a spear into the battlefield. This spear might be able to break Mister's whip. You must not let it fall into the hands of Dongfang Chong Ao." Yin Biao stopped in midair. Although he looked relaxed, he didn't dare to get too close to Dongfang Chong Ao. He was constantly on guard, afraid that Dongfang Chong Ao would launch another sneak attack. He was really shocked just now. When he heard Yin Bu Gui's telepathic message, he looked towards the direction of supporting Immortals Island. As expected, there was someone holding a black spear. He couldn't help but smile and reply to Yin Bu Gui. "Palace Master Yin is worrying too much. The black dragon whip in our hands is made from a flood dragon that had cultivated for thousands of years. He extracted its tendons, peeled its scales, and refined its bones. How can it be broken by ordinary treasures?" Yanbu Gue saw that this guy was underestimating his enemy, so he reminded him again, supporting Xian Island is not comparable to ordinary sections. The golden sword spear in Dongfang Chong Ao's hands is also an upper-grade treasure. It's just that Mister's black dragon whip is able to restrain it. Now that they're taking out something to replace the golden sword spear, it's definitely not an ordinary treasure. "Mister, you must not be careless." Yin Biao was alert. The two people in the air were looking at the spear in Quan Deming's hand. All the sects also saw some clues and knew that supporting Xian Island had brought out a powerful treasure. Quan Deming looked at the position and transmitted a message. "Elder Dongfang, get ready to pick up the spear." After saying that, he threw the spear. A black shadow drew an arc and landed on a protruding boulder at the bottom of the valley. The black spear was inserted into the rock at an oblique angle. There was almost no sound, only the black end of the spear was exposed. All the sects were shocked. It was indeed a treasured spear. Dongfang Chong Ao, who was fighting, was slightly delighted, while Yin Biao was slightly startled. Both of them immediately locked onto that gun. "Hi!" Dongfang Chong Ao shouted. He had waited for so long in order to think of a way. Now that his fellow sect members had come out to save him with a treasure, success or failure would all depend on the spear below. How could he not give it his all? The spear in his hand shot out 100 spear shadows with all his might. Golden light shone as he forced the black dragon whip away. In a flash, he quickly descended. "Dongfang, don't run," Yin Biao shouted. At this time, he was also a little anxious. He made a hand seal, and the black dragon whip chased after Dongfang Chong Ao. Everyone's eyes were focused on the battle between the two. They knew that this was the crucial moment. About 100 meters above the ground, the sound of wind breaking could be heard. Dongfang Chong Ao suddenly stopped, turned around, and used all his strength to shake off the long whip with his spear. Everyone thought that he would be able to pick up the spear below. Unexpectedly, he raised his head and looked at Yin Biao, who was rushing down, and shouted, "Kill!" Then, he raised the golden origin spear and rushed towards Yin Biao. His imposing manner was incomparably valiant. The two of them rushed at each other, and their speeds seemed to close in an instant. Yin Biao originally wanted to use the long whip to entangle Dongfang Chang Ao so that he could keep the spear below to avoid any worries. Who knew that Dongfang Chang Ao would turn around and rush back, as if he had set up a trap for him to fall into. The sharp sound of the golden spear pierced through the air, and Yin Biao was almost scared out of his wits. He hurriedly turned around to escape, but it seemed that it was still a little too late. The two of them had already met, and following a cold snort from Dongfang Chang'o, the golden spear drew out a rain of blood. Ah! Yin Biao screamed. One of his thighs was not able to dodge in time, and was cut off on the spot. The Cultivation Alliance immediately cheered, especially Qiu Weiyun of 10,000 Demons, who was unusually loud and excited. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. This Dongfang Chang'o was indeed Dongfang Chang'o. As long as he was given a chance, he could immediately turn the situation around. This kind of wisdom and courage was definitely not comparable to ordinary people. It was no wonder that he could take on such a heavy responsibility in the world's #1 sect, Fushin Island. Although Yin Biao had lost a leg, his life was still more important. He continued to run for his life, but his vitality was greatly injured, and his speed was already a lot slower. He desperately ran towards the direction of Yin Bugue and the others, shouting loudly, "Two senior brothers, save me!" Among the dozens of people, 2 people immediately rushed out to rescue him. Yin Bugue anxiously shouted, "Don't break the rules." But someone beside him pulled his arm. The 2 people could not care so much now. Their junior brother was about to die. Who would care about the rules? At worst, they could just admit defeat. However, the scene that the 2 of them were most worried about still appeared. Dongfang Chang Ao had already caught up to Yin Biao. His expression was as calm as still water, and he raised a spear above Yin Biao's head. The 2 of them immediately shouted, "Show mercy!" Yin Biao turned around in horror, only to see a ray of golden light flying towards him. Dongfang Chang Ao had just used the spear 3 times, and his movements were clean and neat. He was indeed someone who had used the spear for a long time. A few pieces of minced meat and blood fell to the ground accompanied by a shrill scream. Yin Biao was finished. The Cultivation Alliance once again cheered nonstop. "Junior brother!" The 2 people who were rushing over exclaimed. The 2 people raised their hands and pulled out whips that were exactly the same as Yin Biao's. Dongfang Chang Ao turned around and left, landing on the ground at the fastest speed. Not far away, he saw the ownerless long black whip lying quietly on the ground. He raised his hand and grabbed it, then directly threw it into his storage bag. This could be considered as his spoils of war. Seeing that the 2 people who pulled the whips were picking up the pieces of Yin Biao's body, he looked at the broken leg in front of him. He was afraid that the other party would not let this go so easily. Dongfang Chang Ao first took out an energy recovery pill and swallowed it. At the same time, he stuffed the golden origin spear in his hand into his storage bag. He turned around and grabbed the black spear handle on the boulder behind him. As he grabbed it, his eyes slightly widened. He suddenly pulled out the black Dragon Slayer spear that was stuck on the boulder and raised it to take a closer look. The long spear was cold and pitch black. The dragon claw held the spear's spine, and the 9 dragons' roaming spear was like a raging dragon spitting out cold blades. The entire spear was almost covered by the fine scales of the dragon, and it looked extraordinary. In particular, there seemed to be a huge amount of power contained within it. That kind of terrifying power seemed familiar. Dongfang Chang Ao looked at the fellow sect members of supporting Xian Island in surprise. He had never heard of such a spear in the sect. If there was one, it would have been given to him long ago. He reckoned that it would not have dragged on until now. "Elder Dongfang, you have won the first round. The 2 consecrators have summoned you back." Dongfang Chang Ao suddenly received a voice transmission from Quan Deming. He nodded slightly and flew back to the people of supporting Xian Island in a flash. The surroundings were filled with cheers. The Cultivation Alliance had won the first round, and all the sects were cheering. "Elder Dongfang is indeed amazing," Yu Qianqiu praised happily. This really made him overjoyed. He had not even used the spear, and he had already earned 50 million. Even if he lost in the end, he could still earn 10 million. If he had known earlier, he would not have spent 40 million. Dongfang Chong AO was startled. Why was this guy here? He nodded and did not say anything. However, Yu Qinsho stretched out his hand and said, Elder Dongfang, please return the Dragon Slayer spear to me. This spear is yours? Dongfang Chong AO looked at the fellow sect members in surprise. Finally, his eyes fell on Quan Deming. The latter nodded silently and said, I borrowed it from Yu Qinsho for emergencies. I promised him that I would return it to him after one round. This, Dongfang Chong AO's eyes lingered on the spear. He was a little reluctant to part with it. After a little hesitation, he said decisively, Yu Qinsho, are you selling this spear? Yu Qinsho waved his hand and said, No, I won't sell it no matter how much money you give me. Elder Dongfang, please return the spear to me. At this moment, someone in the valley suddenly shouted, Middle stage tribulation passing cultivator. Yin Fong is here to accept the challenge. Dongfang Chong AO, do you dare to come down and fight me? Everyone from supporting Xian Island looked over. It was none other than one of Yin Biao's senior brothers. It seemed like he wanted to take revenge. Dongfang Chong AO snorted and turned to Yu Qinsho and said, Yu Qinsho, lend me the spear for one more round. I will return it to you after I use it. Chong AO. Jin Yin stopped him and shook his head. Supporting Xian Island has to fight for the first round. Since we have already won, let the other sects do the rest. Supporting Xian Island only needs to make a move at the crucial moment. Dongfang Chong AO stopped and pondered. He knew that the sect had their own considerations. He could not control his own impulse. He looked at the people at the foot of the mountain and gritted his teeth as he handed the Dragon Slayer spear in his hand to Yu Qinsho. Yu Qinsho took it and touched it before stuffing it into his storage bag. He bowed to Jin Yin and said, After the challenge ends, I will come back to find you. Jin Yin nodded with a gloomy expression. Just touching the spear had cost supporting Immortal Island 50 million. If he had known that Dongfang Chong AO would kill like that, he would have just thrown something as a trigger. There was no need to waste so much money. Yu Qinsho did not care so much. After leaving supporting Xian Island, he went back to the four families. He popped her head over and asked curiously, I saw it just now. The gun that was thrown down seems to have been taken out by you? Yu Qinsho looked at her. It was good to have a high cultivation. So many people were blocking, and yet she saw it. Actually, it was not just Zi Yi who saw it. Many people saw it. Even if they did not see it, they would have guessed it. If supporting Xian Island really had a spear, they would have taken it out long ago. There was no need to surround him and take out a spear. If it was not his, who else could it be? Yin Biao's senior apprentice brother was still shouting, What? Dongfang Chang'o does not dare to come out, but the whole Chinese cultivation world does not dare to come out? Are you all cowards? Who will fight me? He shouted and scolded for a long time, but no one from the sects came out. The key was that everyone knew how powerful the whip was from Dongfang Chong AO's battle. Those with the same cultivation as Dongfang Chong AO would not be able to deal with it better. And the cultivators in the final stage of tribulation passing couldn't come out because of the rules. For a moment, people from the sects looked at each other. That whip was troublesome. Yu Qinsho looked left and right for a long time. Seeing that everyone was still hesitating, he could not help but laugh. Hee, since everyone is so polite, I won't be polite. Ziyi's eyes brightened. You want to go up? His fighting style was always so novel. She liked watching it. Hee, what do you think? We can't let people laugh at us Chinese cultivation world for not having anyone. Yu Qinsho's mouth twitched as he drew a machete in each hand and shouted, I'm coming. Chapter 395. To shout like that at this time, it would be the center of attention. Baishan still wanted to persuade him, but it was too late. A silhouette dashed down the mountain. He didn't fly, but rather he leaped. Holding two knives bigger than a human, he fanned himself and rushed down the mountain like a bat, his movements extremely fast. Although the crowd did not see clearly who it was, Who else could it be other than Yu Qianqiu, who came from the four great families and held such strange knives? All the sects looked at each other, speechless, and felt a little ashamed. So many sects, but no one came out to fight, forcing a guy who could not fly to run and jump down to fight. How could they not feel ashamed? They were afraid that they would not be able to avoid a round of humiliation. Yin Fang's junior brother died, and he wanted to find someone to vent his anger, but he did not expect that the one who came to challenge him was a guy who could not even fly and looked very young. He was stunned for a moment, then laughed and said, "Is there no one in China?" "Ha, young man, I don't kill nameless people. Seeing that your courage is commendable, I will spare your life. Quickly go back and call your elders." "Hee hee, you don't know me, what a joke." Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. He did not stop and directly rushed over. "Be careful," Yin Bu-Gui suddenly shouted from the top of the mountain. The stumbling Yu Qianqiu ran all the way down and was already close to Yin Fang. Yin Fang still did not know the opponent's background and was still laughing. Hearing the warning, Yin Fang looked around and saw that the young man who rushed over did not say anything, but raised his knife and slashed at him. His movements were quite smooth. Yin Fang sneered disdainfully, waved the whip in his hand to block, and said in a deep voice, "It seems that I have to kill a nameless person today." His voice stopped abruptly. The black knife waved, and the snake-like black whip was cut into two. Yin Fang felt his neck cold, and his eyes opened wide in disbelief. But his vision had changed, and he saw his chin on the cold and wide knife. The young man did not hesitate to wave the other knife, and split a headless body in half, and his vision gradually blurred. The whole place was silent. Even the sound of the wind seemed to have quietened down. Only the words of the young man with the saber could be heard. Yu Qianqiu stood with the saber in front of him, looking at the head that had died with its eyes wide open. He said expressionlessly, "So what if he's famous or not? One saber is enough." With a twist of the blade, the head fell off. Yu Qianqiu quickly went over to take the storage bag from the corpse and put it away. Then, he turned around and ran back up the mountain with the two broadswords. What was the point of staying here if he didn't run after the fight? Safety first. When Yu Qianqiu ran back to the four great clans and put away the two sabers, everyone still felt as if they were in a dream. Running down just like that, chopping people down with one slash, then running back, and it was over just like that? Junior brother. A sorrowful howl came from the mountain where Yin Bu-Gui was. The last of the three brothers landed in a flash. Good. The people of the Cultivation Alliance reacted and immediately cheered loudly. When had they ever seen such a classic battle? Going down the mountain only needed one slash to cut off the head of a mid-stage tribulation passing expert, and then turning back, it only took a moment. It was so cool that they had no words to say, especially the last sentence. So what if he's famous or not? One saber is enough. It pushed everyone's emotions to a climax. The applause was explosive, and Zi, who was stunned and then came back to her senses, kept clapping. Looking at the people around her, her face showed a smile that had never been seen before. Elder Bai's disciple was really extraordinary. Everyone's eyes were focused on Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu came out in a straightforward manner, cupped his fists, and bowed to the people around him, saying, I was lucky. What he got in return was even more intense cheers. A consecrator from the 10,000 demons was called Neo Senator. He looked at Yu Qianqiu and suddenly said to Qiu Yuan in a deep voice, Qiu Yuan. He originally wanted to join the 10,000 demons, but Yu chased him away. After this is over, you can go and ask Yu Qianqiu if he is still willing to join the 10,000 demons. Qiu Yuan nodded speechlessly. The people from a supporting Immortals Island were even more amazed, shaking their heads and smiling bitterly. This guy was just wandering around here. How did he come back with a saber in the blink of an eye and kill an expert in the middle stage of the Crossing Calamity stage? Dongfang Chang Ao recalled the scene of Yu Qianqiu cutting off the long whip with a saber and sighed. This saber is really extraordinary. I wonder how does that spear compare to it? In fact, everyone understood that the reason why Yu Qianqiu was able to kill with a saber was because the other party was careless and didn't know his background. He didn't expect that his whip could be easily cut off, so he lost his life. But for the Cultivation Alliance, this was something to gain face, so everyone was equally excited. They were right to think this way, but they didn't think about it. If it was an ordinary person who would dare to use a saber to kill someone in the Crossing Calamity stage with a nascent soul stage cultivation. In fact, Yu Qianqiu also thought that he would have to go through a lot of trouble, but he didn't expect that the other party didn't know him, so he made a decision in the blink of an eye. Kill him. People who can make such a prompt decision are not as easy as they say or think. An old man in embroidered clothes stood next to Yin Bugui. He had been staring at the purple clothes next to Yu Qianqiu and suddenly asked, "Is the person with the saber Yu Qianqiu that man who mentioned? Who else could it be other than that rascal?" Yin Bugui stared at Yu Qianqiu and said with hatred, Yin Fong really underestimated his enemy too much. He was actually defeated so easily. It's not necessarily because Yin Fong underestimated his enemy. If it were me, I'm afraid I would also have made a mistake. It's the first time I've seen such a brave young man. No wonder he's so famous. The old man in embroidered clothes looked at Yu Qianqiu's eyes, revealing a sense of admiration, and asked, "I heard that this Yu Qianqiu also defeated the head of China's Daoyuo sect, Luo Qingtian. Didn't you investigate his background?" "We did, but there's no way to find out. After this guy was expelled from Fuxin Island, he rarely appeared in the cultivation world. No one knows where he is, but he appeared again recently." Yin Bugui said. "He disappeared for a period of time, but now he appears again, and he even has a treasure that ordinary people can't have." The old man in embroidered clothes looked at the purple clothes, then looked at Yu Qianqiu and nodded thoughtfully. "I'm afraid it's not that simple. Murderer, state your name." After the eldest senior martial brother collected his junior martial brother's corpse, he pointed at Yu Qianqiu and shouted, "Mid-stage tribulation passing cultivator, Yin Cheng accepts the challenge. Who dares to fight?" This was clearly telling Yu Qianqiu to go down and fight him. "Damn it, with so many people watching, you want me to go down just because you tell me to? Dongfang Chong Ao also killed your junior martial brother. Why are you only looking for me? Am I easy to bully?" Yu Qianqiu looked down expressionlessly, pretending that he didn't hear anything. In his heart, he was thinking that Fuxin Island wouldn't give up just like that, and they might even have to rent his spear. "I was stupid just now. I can earn money for free. Why should I go down and do such a sinful thing? A bunch of cowards." Yin Cheng was so angry that he started cursing, and the more he cursed, the uglier it became. The more people heard, the uglier their faces became. Think about it. There were so many people here, and there were many people who were stronger than Yin Cheng, but no one came out to fight. This was really embarrassing. The key was that the opponent's whip was too powerful. Although they won the first 2 rounds, even if they asked Dongfang Chong Ao to go up, it would still be difficult for them to beat him. At the end of the day, no sect would be like Yu Qianqiu, running around with precious treasures. At present, they could only deal with the treasures in Yu Qianqiu's hands. Otherwise, they couldn't let Yu Qianqiu wait until they returned to their sects to pick out suitable treasures before they started fighting. The cursing was still going on, but no one came out to fight. Time was also passing, and if no one came out to fight after 2 hours, Yin Bugui would take the initiative to win. Not only would they get 1 billion spirit stones, they would also be able to damage the reputation of the Chinese cultivation world. At this moment, the 10,000 demons' faces were the ugliest. The leader of the righteous sects, Fuxin Island, had won the first round, but as the leader of the evil sects, the 10,000 demons, there was no response at all. After they returned, the prestige of the 10,000 demons in the evil sects would definitely plummet. Qiu Yin was now a little uneasy and restless. He wasn't confident that he could deal with that strange whip, and if he didn't fight, how would the 10,000 demons face their fellow evil sects in the future? His restlessness fell into Yin Bugui's eyes, and a trace of bitterness flashed across Yin Bugui's face. He gritted his teeth and sent a telepathic message to Yin Cheng, who was below. "The person who killed your junior brother is called Yu Qianqiu." "Yu Qianqiu?" Yincheng suddenly pointed his finger and shouted, "You coward, is Yu Qianqiu?" Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned. F*CK. Who told him? He immediately looked around, looking for any suspicious people. He believed that Yin Bugui's side, seeing that victory was in sight and that they were about to reap rich benefits, would definitely not reveal his name and let Yincheng curse him. Instead, it was very likely that someone on his side was hoping that he would fight, so his name was leaked. His first thought was that he had been betrayed by someone on his side, but in the end, every sect he looked at was suspicious. Forcing me? The more it is like this, the more I won't go. Yu Qianqiu was a little angry, but Yincheng obviously had some understanding of Yu Qianqiu's name, as he said all kinds of nasty things. Things like disrespecting his masters, betraying one sect after another as a double surname slave. This challenge had become a war of words. All the sects looked at Yu Qianqiu, wondering how long could he endure it. He stared at the people below with a frosty face. It was fine if it was just 1 or 2 sentences, but if he continued to endure it, he wouldn't be able to show his face in the future. Yu Qianqiu finally couldn't listen to it anymore. With a livid face, he stepped forward and shouted, "How dare you shout at me? Are you tired of living? Are you courting death? Yu Qianqiu, come down and fight if you have the guts." Yincheng pointed his finger and shouted, "Since you're tired of living, I'll send you down there to accompany your 2 junior brothers." After Yu Qianqiu finished speaking in a cold tone, he waved his hand and a green flying sword flashed out from his sleeve, quickly carrying him into the sky. In the sky, he waved his 2 sleeves continuously, and streams of green light flew out continuously. The 2 sleeves were like storage bags, and no one knew how many flying swords were hidden in them. 1,000 flying swords danced in the sky, and the imposing manner was really shocking. Yu Qianqiu kept his sleeves. So far, with his current cultivation, controlling 1,000 flying swords at the same time was already his limit. Moreover, the green fire element in his body was almost depleted, and even if he wanted to release more swords, he couldn't release more. Chapter 396. The sunlight refracted the green shadows, and the green light flowed endlessly, covering the entire valley, causing the entire valley to sink into a hazy green light. Everyone squinted their eyes at the piercing green light, but they still couldn't conceal their shock. Rumor had it that there was an extraordinary person in the ancient times who could control 10,000 swords at the same time. The rumor was not to be believed, but now everyone had witnessed Yu Qianqiu releasing 1,000 flying swords in a fit of rage. They danced in the air and looked at the vast land like a tiger, wanting to take someone's life. Yincheng was dumbfounded as he looked up. He subconsciously felt that he had stirred up a hornet's nest. Yin Bugui and the rest looked at each other, then at Yu Qianqiu, who was coldly staring down from the sky. They all had an expression of disbelief. The people of Supporting Immortals Island looked at each other. Gui Yuan's sword technique, 1,000 swords control. Yincheng, do you know your crime? Yu Qianqiu's cold voice descended from the sky and reverberated in the valley. The flying swords above his head all stopped. The dazzling green blades slowly adjusted their direction and stared at Yincheng below. The black flame machete was able to take someone's life with a single slash. It was impossible for it to happen again. This time, he sent out all the green flame flying swords that he could control. He wanted to have a fair and square battle, to let the entire cultivation world know of his abilities and that he did not rely on luck to establish himself. A nascent soul cultivator was actually questioning a tribulation passing stage cultivator with such a matter-of-fact tone. Everyone was speechless. They didn't know if Yincheng could withstand the power of the 1,000 swords. It seemed that these green flying swords were not ordinary flying swords. If it was them, thinking of a scene of 1,000 flying swords shooting at them at the same time, everyone subconsciously shivered. Ziyi's gaze lingered on the 1,000 flying swords. Her pretty face was filled with excitement. She clenched her fists tightly. From Yu Qianqiu's domineering aura, she seemed to see the shadow of senior Bai. The faces of the four major families were filled with solemn respect. The disciple of the old ancestor was not angry, but once he was angry, he would shake the world. What crime did I commit? Yin Chung smacked his lips and asked dryly. His tone had changed from cursing and arrogant to cautious. When it came to life and death, it was strength that determined the opponent's attitude. Who told you my name? Yu Qianqiu glanced at the surrounding mountains and changed the topic. The moment he said that, the various sects started sizing each other up. In fact, everyone had the same suspicion as Yu Qianqiu. Yin Bugui snorted coldly and transmitted his voice to Yin Chung. Mr. Yin, you don't have to hesitate. You can tell him that I told you. He had a grudge against Yu Qianqiu, so why would he care about one more dish? Although it didn't matter if he said it. How could Yin Chung give him up? If he really did that, it wouldn't be a matter of him losing face, but his teacher who lived far away in Xiushui country would lose face with him. Thinking of his teacher who had reached the soul formation stage, Yin Cheng's confidence was boosted. He shouldn't be scared by his pretense. No matter how strong a nascent soul cultivator was, how strong could he be? So he waved his whip and shouted, Yu Qianqiu, if you want to fight, then fight. Don't be so long-winded. At the end of the day, he still didn't have enough confidence. Otherwise, he would have made a move long ago and wouldn't have been so long-winded. You really don't know what's good for you. In my eyes, that lousy whip of yours is no different from withered grass and rotten wood. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and raised his hand. I have 1,000 flying swords waiting for you. If you have the cultivation of the final stage of the tribulation passing stage, you might be able to escape from my 1,000 flying swords with your teleportation. Unfortunately, you're not. I'll give you one more chance to live. Tell me the person who said my name and cut off your own tongue. Then I'll let you go. Otherwise, you won't be able to see tomorrow's sunrise. After the battle with Luo Qingtian last time, Luo Qingtian's abnormal speed was so fast that even the flying swords couldn't catch up to him. It could be said that Yin Chung had gained some experience. This time, the flying swords of blue fire were waiting for him in battle. They weren't afraid that Yin Chung would escape to the sky. Presumptuous! Yin Chung shouted loudly. His protective upstanding qi instantly surged out from his body and wrapped around himself. The long whip in his hand rose high into the air and shot towards Yu Qianqiu like a spiritual snake. You're courting death. Yu Qianqiu sneered. He pointed with his finger and dozens of streaks of green light flashed out. Like a jackdaw fighting for food, they surrounded the long whip and tossed it around wildly. Even though the flying swords of blue fire were not as good as the flying swords of blue fire, they were still first-rate sharp. Yin Chung and his two brothers had encountered their nemesis when they encountered Yu Qianqiu. When the black dragon whip and the flying swords of blue fire clashed, it was already pecked all over. The others didn't know, but Yin Chung immediately sensed it. In his great shock, he made a hand gesture. The black dragon whip made a bam sound and swung its tail in the air. It shook off Guoshi's flying swords of blue fire. It turned around and was about to fly back. Yu Qianqiu sneered. If there was only one flying sword of blue fire, perhaps it wouldn't be able to do anything to you. However, there were 1,000 of them here. A small whip could escape to the heavens. The sword gesture was activated. Dozens of flying swords had already cut off the whip's path of retreat. A group of ferocious fellows pounced forward and pecked wildly. It was practically a standard gang fight. Yin Cheng's face was filled with anxiety. The Black Dragon Whip was the weapon that he had relied on to make his name. Once it was destroyed, it would be easier said than done to find another treasured weapon that was just as handy. His hand gesture was almost a mirage. The whip scurried everywhere in midair. It dodged left and right, shook its head, and swung its tail. However, Yu Qianqiu's nimbleness in controlling the flying swords was not inferior to his control of the whip. Once the Black Dragon Whip shook off Guoshi's flying swords, there would be flying swords that were ready to pounce on Guoshi's head, peck at his tail, and pinch at his waist. There was no way for him to escape. He did not allow the whip to escape. He pestered it relentlessly and wrapped it tightly. The divine whip that was previously feared by all the sects was now in such a sorry state. It had no way to escape. Everyone was speechless when they saw this. The people of supporting Immortals Island looked at each other again and again. Ever since Yu Qianqiu had used the Guan sword technique on supporting Immortals Island, everyone had actually studied this sword technique in detail. However, the conclusion that everyone had reached was that it was gaudy. They all felt that it was not practical. Now that 1,000 swords had appeared, just this imposing manner alone was already extraordinary. If they could achieve the effect of Yu Qianqiu's usage, even if the quality of the flying swords was not as good as this green flying sword, imagine if someone was entangled by 1,000 flying swords and ganged up on, just like how this whip was entangled. Apart from a few people who possessed great cultivation base, how many people could escape easily? Moreover, Yu Qianqiu's cultivation base was only at the nascent soul stage. If it was a cultivator at the crossing calamity stage who was controlling it, what kind of consequences would there be? Just thinking about it made people feel expectant. They were guarding the treasured sword technique left behind by their ancestors without realizing it. Everyone had made an error of judgment. The people of supporting Immortals Island suddenly came to their senses and nodded silently at each other. They decided that when they returned to the sect, they would definitely report this matter to the sect leader. They had to pay attention to the Guiyuan sword technique. Yin Sheng was still trying his best to make hand seals, attempting to use his last effort to save the Black Dragon Whip. However, under the watchful eyes of everyone, the sharp tail of the whip, which was either refined from a beast horn or a beast tooth, suddenly broke off from the long whip. A few green rays chased after it and stabbed it a few times. When they realized that it was useless, they immediately flashed back to join the group and continued to attack the long, black thing. The fawn-like tail of the whip fell to the ground sadly. However, it was just the beginning. With it leading the way, the broken whip followed in its footsteps. Yin Sheng felt like crying, but had no tears. He stopped making hand seals, and the Black Dragon Whip was dismembered just like that. The victorious green rays seemed to be a little unsatisfied. They flew around in the air for a while. When there was really no target to attack, they obediently returned to their sword positions. When the various sects witnessed this scene, they were speechless. Such a fierce sword technique was simply unheard of and unseen. Today was an eye-opener for them. When everyone looked at Yu Qianqiu again, their gazes were much more solemn. In the past, when they heard that Yu Qianqiu defeated Luo Qingtian, many people did not see it with their own eyes. They thought that it was because of the sharpness of the treasure and luck. Now, everyone clearly saw the word strength. Although the outcome of this battle had not been decided, Yu Qianqiu had such a powerful and outstanding sword technique. There was no doubt that he should have a place in the cultivation world. The contemptuous gazes of the various sects had disappeared. From today onwards, they would look at this young man with a rather bad reputation. Ziyi's eyes were full of splendor. She watched with relish. It seemed that no matter when or who Yu Qianqiu fought, she would not be very worried. Because of her blind worship of Bai Changchun, she had already thought that Elder Bai's disciple should be like this. Yincheng looked around a little gloomily. Thousands of flying swords were floating in the valley, ready to attack from all angles, aiming at him inside the protective aura. The cyan sword net completely surrounded him. At this moment, whether it was the Cultivation Alliance or Yin Buguwei and the others, when they saw this scene in the valley, they all felt a little ashamed for Yin Sheng. A tribulation-passing cultivator fighting with a nascent soul cultivator was actually trapped to the point that he could not move an inch. It was simply a joke. Yu Qianqiu glanced at Yin Buguwei, who was on the top of the mountain, and smiled faintly at Yin Sheng. Although you were the one who provoked me, I have always been a kind person. You are the only one left out of the three of you. I can't bear to kill you. If you kneel down and beg for mercy, I can spare your life. As soon as he said this, several cold snorts came from Yin Buguwei's side, echoing in the valley. It could be seen that the person who made the sound had a very high cultivation. The group of people stared at Yu Qianqiu like knives. Yin Sheng was representing them. If he knelt down and admitted defeat, he would not only lose face, but Yin Buguwei and the others who took the initiative to challenge him would also be completely disgraced. This was just like if someone from the Cultivation Alliance knelt down and admitted defeat, then the face that the Huaxia cultivation world would be lost even if they wanted to in the future. The people from the Cultivation Alliance also secretly clicked their tongues, thinking that Yu Qianshou had really gone too far by saying such words. But they didn't know that Yu Qianshou had other considerations. There were rules in the challenge. If one party admitted defeat, the other party could not kill again. He provoked them with words because he wanted to cut off the other party's way of admitting defeat and then kill them. He never thought that letting his opponent live was a good thing, since he had decided to use this battle to earn a name in the cultivation world. Then the experience from his previous life told him that it was often more effective to win people over with virtue than to have a fierce reputation. As long as he stood firm, he could slowly accumulate virtue and do good in the future. Sure enough, when Yin Cheng heard this, he immediately flew into a rage. He pointed his finger and shouted, "Yu Qianshou, don't be so arrogant. You want to force me to beg for mercy and admit defeat with just a flying sword? What a joke." Clang! As soon as he finished speaking, he saw a green light hit his protective vigor chi like lightning. The protective vigor chi was not damaged at all, and the green light quickly returned to its place. Yu Qianshou nodded and said with a smile, "Sure enough, you have something to rely on, no wonder. But today, I will let you foreign cultivators learn a lesson. How can the Huaxia cultivation world be a place where you can mess around?" Chapter 397. Hearing this, Yin Buguwei was silent, but some of the people around him were livid. The Cultivation Alliance naturally applauded. Yin Cheng snorted coldly. Relying on his protective gang chi, he forcefully knocked away the flying swords that stopped around him and quickly rushed towards the direction of Yin Buguwei and the others. His intention was obvious. As long as he left the valley, he would lose and the opponent would not chase him anymore. This was the best way to save his life after failing the challenge. Yu Qianshou sneered. Sure enough, as I expected, everyone wants to live when they are in danger. You want to run away like this? Fortunately, I planned it first. Otherwise, if you admit defeat in public, I will have to stop. Everyone also saw Yin Cheng's intention. He did not admit defeat verbally, but he wanted to escape. He wanted to save his life, but he did not want to lose too much face. Next, it was up to Yu Qianshou to make him stay. To everyone's surprise, the flying swords all over the valley did not carry out a fierce attack. Hundreds of flying swords moved with Yin Cheng, waiting for the right moment, and the remaining hundreds of swords wrapped around the protective gang chi that was escaping. Looking from a distance, it looked like a cactus or a hedgehog flying. Yu Qianshou stopped in midair, arms crossed in front of his chest, and stared expressionlessly at the spiked ball. Everyone did not know what he was going to do. Yin Cheng, who was hiding in the protective gang chi, also felt a little surprised. The opponent did not attack forcefully. Although this was good, it made people feel inexplicably uneasy. His worry was right. Yu Qianshou would not let him go like this. Just as he felt uneasy and sped up to escape, a scorching heat suddenly came from outside his protective upstanding chi. The protective upstanding chi that was connected to his mind almost collapsed in an instant, but the flying swords outside forced him to resist it with brute force. Everyone was surprised to find that Yin Cheng had stopped in the air. Could it be that he suddenly came to his senses and wanted to fight with Yu Qianshou for the sake of his dignity? Yin Buguwei and the rest looked at each other, not knowing what Yin Cheng was trying to do. Glancing at Yu Qianshou, they realized that he was sneering at them with malicious intentions. Suddenly, they felt that something was amiss. Several voice transmissions rang out in Yin Cheng's ears, asking him what exactly was going on. However, he was currently in a difficult situation and was circulating his energy to resist with all his might. The scorching heat seemed to be teasing him. When he was just able to adapt a little, the temperature immediately rose a little. When he was barely able to adapt, the temperature rose again. It seemed that it would not let go until he was forced to use his protective upstanding chi. However, he had no treasures in his hands now. Once he left the protective upstanding chi and faced the 1,000 flying swords outside, he would die. Yin Cheng's eyes were red, his skin was bright red, and his 7 orifices were bleeding. Finally, he could no longer bear such torment. He made the same move as the Daoyuo sect master Luo Qingtian, self-destructing his protective aura shield. Bang! Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, a loud noise sounded out of thin air. The spiky ball wrapped by the green flying swords was instantly blown into pieces. The airflow surged, and a figure quickly sprang out from it. He wanted to take advantage of the impact of the explosion to scatter the flying swords and quickly escape. However, there were only a few hundred flying swords that were blown away by the explosion. The remaining few hundred were already prepared and waiting for him. As soon as Yin Cheng sprang out, hundreds of green cold lights immediately broke through the turbulent airflow and shot towards him from all directions like lightning. Yin Cheng was able to cultivate to the middle stage of crossing calamity, so he was not completely useless. Without the burden of the protective aura shield, when he saw the group of flying sword attacking him, he also went all out. He immediately struck out his palms in all directions like shadows. Bang, bang, bang. He slapped out a powerful force, knocking away the flying swords that were attacking him. He forcefully resisted the first round of attacks with his profound cultivation base. However, there were too many flying swords. Even the green flying swords that were blown away by his self-detonation of the protective aura shield also swept towards him again. Everyone was silent. Looking at the situation, they knew that this master in the middle stage of crossing calamity was making a futile last-ditch struggle. He forcibly consumed his cultivation base to resist, but he could not move an inch. How long could he resist like this? Although they did not know what method Yu Qianqiu used to force him to self-detonate his protective aura shield, since he had arranged everything step by step, they were afraid that he did not intend to let him go. After all, there were too many flying swords. Finally, there was a streak of cyan cold light that slipped through the net. Yin Cheng, who was already bleeding from his 7 apertures, suddenly felt a chill on his back. His body fiercely trembled, and after a slight ferocious expression, an inexplicable sorrow flashed across his face. He saw with his own eyes that a cyan blade had drilled out of his chest, bringing with it a bright red flower of blood. Yin Cheng used all his strength to slap a few times and shouted at Yu Qianqiu in a shrill voice, "Yu Qianqiu, even if I become a ghost, I will not let you go." His mournful voice reverberated endlessly in the valley. It was no wonder that he would say such resentful words. After he died, the deaths of his 3 fellow apprentices were inextricably linked to Yu Qianqiu. How could he not hate? All of a sudden, thousands of flying swords stopped in the air and did not continue to attack. Everyone was surprised. Was this guy going to show mercy? While they were puzzled, they heard Yu Qianqiu say indifferently, "Even if I become a ghost, you will not let me go?" What a joke. I hope you can cultivate until the end of the Ghost King after you become a ghost. Otherwise, you are not even qualified to see me. I have a word of advice for you. After you become a ghost, you should peacefully reincarnate as a human. This conversation puzzled everyone, but Ze and the people of the 4 families understood. If a person became a ghost, his resentment would be too strong. It was possible that he would not enter the underworld and stay in the human world. However, the yang qi in the human world was too strong. It was not something that a little ghost who had just become a ghost cultivator could bear. He was afraid that his soul would disappear soon. Even if he could barely survive, how could the cultivators of the human world let a ghost cultivator stay in the human world? The Taoist protector would definitely kill him. At present, the only place suitable for ghost cultivators to cultivate was the demon ghost realm, which gathered in Qi. However, if they wanted to find trouble with Yu Qianqiu in the demon ghost realm, with Yu Qianqiu's identity in the demon ghost realm, it would be a joke if it was not. As soon as he finished speaking, the green light flashed, and the swords swarmed to snatch it. In exchange, a shrill scream was drowned in the bloodthirsty green light in the blink of an eye. As the blood mist spread in the air, a few pieces of ragged clothes were also chased by the green light and turned into dust. Everyone gasped. Not only was this sword technique powerful and fierce, but it was also abnormally vicious. It actually turned Yin Cheng's bones into dust. Not even a piece of his remains was left. The people of supporting Immortals Island looked at each other firmly again. The Guiyuan sword technique could actually be so fierce. It was really a top-notch sword technique for killing enemies. As the smell of blood spread, Yu Qianshou frowned slightly. He opened his arms, and thousands of cold lights were summoned. They split into 2 green torrents and returned. In the blink of an eye, all of them were absorbed into his sleeves. Immediately, Yu Qianshou's figure flashed, and he quickly returned to the front of the 4 families on his sword. As soon as he landed, the green light under his feet also nimbly flicked into his sleeves. The blood mist in the air was blown away by a gust of wind. Ziyi looked at Yu Qianshou, who had returned victorious, and clapped her hands excitedly. The applause was abrupt. The atmosphere on the side of the Cultivation Alliance also recovered from the depressing atmosphere. When they remembered that they had won again, they immediately cheered again. However, everyone seemed to have lost the passion from before. The applause and cheers were much more reserved. Everyone looked at Yu Qianshou with a more complicated expression. From today onwards, no sect would dare to look down on this person. Senior Chong, why didn't you let me shout for Yin Cheng just now? At least he could have saved his life. Yin Bugui asked the old man in embroidered robes beside him. Just now, Yin Cheng was in a precarious situation. When he was about to shout for help, he was stopped by the old man. The old man in embroidered robes replied with a faint smile, Palace Master Yin, you are now representing the cultivation world of each country. How can you say something like admitting defeat? This explanation is too far-fetched. If I can't say it, can't you say it too? Who knows what you're planning? Yin Bugui frowned and didn't say anything. The old man in embroidered robes seemed to have seen through his thoughts. He said with a smile, although Yin Ji of Xiushui country's rumor sect can't personally come to the cultivation world of China, he has a junior brother named Yin Huan. His cultivation level is quite high. He has reached the peak of the final stage of tribulation passing. It is said that he has reached the beginning of the soul formation stage. If Yin Ji knew that all 3 of his disciples died here, he would definitely ask his junior brother to come here. Palace Master Yin, do you think it's worth it to exchange the life of a cultivator in the middle stage of tribulation passing for an expert who is close to the soul formation stage? Yin Bugui pondered for a moment and said with a voice transmission, an expert who is close to the soul formation stage? Senior Chong, didn't you say that the world's most powerful cultivator forbade any soul formation stage cultivators to come to the cultivation world of China? If we really attract this expert, will it provoke the world's most powerful cultivator to intervene? No. Although Yin Huan's cultivation level is high, he has not reached the soul formation stage. He is not restricted. The old man in embroidered robes' face twitched. Who is the world's most powerful cultivator? Have you seen him before, Senior Chong? Yin Bugui asked with a voice transmission. To be honest, a year ago, Yin Bugui had always thought that soul formation stage cultivators were legendary figures who probably didn't exist in reality. However, in his most critical moment, a group of disciples of soul formation stage cultivators suddenly came to his rescue. This was simply unbelievable. After the incident, both sides reached an agreement to use each other. He also understood the purpose of these people's visit. However, what he was most curious about was what kind of person the legendary world's most powerful cultivator was. How could he make so many soul formation stage cultivators hesitate and really not dare to take a step into China? This was a little unimaginable. He had asked these people more than once, but no one was willing to tell him in detail. It was as if this world's most powerful cultivator was a taboo in everyone's mouth. Hearing this, the old man in embroidered robes went into a trance. That time, He begged his master to take him to the East Sea to see the world. At the time, his master didn't think it was a big deal, so he brought him along. Who knew what happened in the end? It was simply chilling. That person brazenly forced all the soul formation stage cultivators in the world to swear a poison oath. In the end, because he was slightly unhappy, he attacked. After being humiliated, 16 top-level cultivators joined forces to fight to the death, but they all died in the hands of that person. That light green-robed figure was like a nightmare. Whenever he closed his eyes, he would remember that person's cultivation level was so terrifying that he couldn't even imagine it in his dreams. Palace Master Yin, that kind of person is not someone we should be concerned about. Let's take care of the matter in front of us. The old man in embroidered robes said with a changing expression. None of them told the Yin father and son that the reason why the soul formation stage cultivators didn't come was because they were forced to swear a poison oath. There were two reasons why they didn't say it. The first was because they were afraid that the Yin father and son would be scared. The second was because no one would say that their master had been humiliated. Yin Bugue grunted and slightly nodded his head. Out of the corner of his eyes, he caught a slight trace of fear on the old man's face. In his heart, he made up his mind to find a way to understand this world's most powerful cultivator. Otherwise, when the time comes, he wouldn't know he had suffered loss. Chapter 398. After a long time, no one from either side accepted the challenge. Yin Bugue looked at the people on his left and right. Seeing their hesitant eyes, he couldn't help but sneer in his heart. Before this, they were all determined to raise 1 billion, ready to embarrass the Huaxia cultivation world and make a fortune. Now, a nascent soul stage Uqianshou had scared them so much that no one dared to go up. Yin Bugue's guess was right. Except for the 2 experts at the final stage of tribulation passing, the other dozens of people were indeed quite afraid of Uqianshou. They wanted to go down and accept the challenge, but they were afraid that the guy with 1,000 flying swords would jump out again. Everyone's cultivation was about the same as Yin Sheng and his brothers, so they couldn't be much higher. They really couldn't guarantee that they could win against Uqianshou. No one was willing to risk their lives to try. They could only wait for someone else to come up and then challenge him. On the side of the Cultivation Alliance, seeing that the 3 whip experts had all been killed and the threat of the strange whip was gone, they were a little tempted. However, they were also worried that these foreign cultivators would use some strange treasures again, so they were a little hesitant. Uqianshou looked around and sneered. They wanted to show off, but they were afraid of paying the price. Every one of them was calculating, and none of them were good. After cursing in his heart, he looked at Zi. Zi was excited and asked, "Do you want me to go up?" Just as Uqianshou was about to nod his head to signal her to make a move, they heard the sound of something flying through the air in the distance. Everyone raised their heads and looked over. A black shadow arrived in the blink of an eye, landing directly in front of the people from the Myriad Demon's palace. A lean and skinny old man in black slowly turned around with his hand behind his back. His snow-white hair flowed freely behind his back as he stared at the mountaintop, where Yinbu Gue was at with a glint in his eyes. Before he spoke, the aura of a superior made all the people of the 10,000 demons stand with their hands tied, and they lowered their heads slightly without saying a word. Baishan took a deep breath and said, "Why is he here? Who is this person?" Uqianshou asked, puzzled. To be able to make the 10,000 demons look like this, the person who came must have a high status among the 10,000 demons. It's Yin Wuchen. He's the previous palace master of the 10,000 demons. Why is he here? Before Baishan could reply, many people around him answered Uqianshou's question. This person was known as the most ambitious and ruthless person in the Devil Path, the previous palace master of the 10,000 demons, Yin Wuchen. Now that he had come, it was unknown why he had come, but it was most likely related to his son, Yin Bugue. When Uqianshou heard this, he immediately sized him up carefully. Such a famous figure was the #1 gangster in the cultivation world. Worthy of reverence, Yin Wuchen had been famous in the cultivation world for a long time. He had retired many years ago, so most people had never seen him before. Now that he had suddenly appeared, he immediately became the center of attention. Umph! Unfilial son. Yin Wuchen let out a cold snort. His voice was not loud, but it echoed in the valley, showing his cultivation level. Yin Bugue looked over and was already a little dumbfounded. The cultivators from the other countries also frowned. Yu Qianqiu looked at both sides, and his heart was filled with joy. There was going to be a good show to watch. Wuhan, Yin Wuchen called out coldly. Qiu Wen immediately went over and bowed respectfully. Master, what's the situation now? Yin Wuchen asked. Qiu Wen immediately recounted the entire process of the challenge, pointing at Yu Qianqiu as he spoke. Unexpectedly, as soon as he finished speaking, everyone saw Yin Wuchen backhand slap Qiu Weiyuan's face. After being slapped, Qiu Weiyuan lowered his head and didn't say anything. Instead, he became even more respectful. Yin Wuchen turned his head and stared coldly at Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu hated people who took advantage of their seniority. He turned his head to the side, too lazy to pay attention to them. He didn't care who they were. That slap shocked everyone. Yin Wuchen really didn't give any face to Qiu Weiyuan. He slapped Qiu Weiyuan in front of so many people. Everyone was stunned when they suddenly realized that Yin Bugue had disappeared. They looked around and found that he was already in the valley. What was he going to do? Late-stage tribulation cultivator, Yin Wuchen is here to accept the challenge. The voice spread loudly in the valley, answering everyone's doubts. The various sects of the Cultivation Alliance looked at each other. They didn't expect that someone like Yin Wuchen, who was rarely seen, would come all the way here just to ruin his own son's reputation. Yin Bugue and the others were livid, especially Yin Bugue, who looked like he had lost his soul. All the cultivators from the various countries stared at the two old men beside Yin Bugue. One was dressed in brocade robes, the other in linen robes. Only their cultivation was qualified to fight against him. But the two of them looked at Yin Bugue with an unreadable expression. Yin Wuchen stood indifferently in the valley with his hands behind his back, quietly waiting for his opponent to challenge him. However, as time passed, no one from his opponent came out. Yu Qianqiu observed the movements of Yin Bugue and the others, and the corner of his mouth curled up. Interesting. If this continued, Yin Bugue's side would automatically admit defeat after 2 hours. It seemed that they could consider splitting the money. Just as the 2 hours were about to end, the old man in linen robes stepped out with a sullen face. Yin Bugue immediately stretched out his arm to stop him and shook his head bitterly. Seen your phone, no? That's my father. Yin Wuchen glanced over slightly. The old man in linen robes said in a low voice, Palace Lord Yin, you must be joking. You have to understand that if we don't accept the challenge, we will lose $1 billion. This is not a small amount. We can't lose $1 billion just because it's your father. Who has the face to be worth $1 billion? Senior Chong, do you have any good ideas? Yin Bugue turned and asked the old man in brocade robes for advice. Who doesn't have parents? Palace Lord Yin, we all understand your difficulties. The old man in brocade robes paused and continued, but it's unreasonable to let everyone lose $1 billion just because of your father. This $1 billion is almost all the money we have in our pockets. To us, it's not a small amount. Even if I agree, no one else will. Unless Palace Lord Yin has another way to compensate us for our losses, there's nothing I can do. Yin Bugue's heart was filled with anger. The challenge was caused by you guys. Now, other than the two of you who are in the final stage of the tribulation passing stage, the rest of the tribulation passing stage have been intimidated by Yu Qianqiu. Even if the two of you fight, who can guarantee that you'll be a match for my father? Now you're asking me to compensate for your losses? If I can really unify the cultivation world of China, then I can let you pick any 2 spirit stone mines and mine them indefinitely. Right now, I can only make an empty promise. If you don't think it's appropriate, then please do as you please. Yin Bugue said in a low voice. He had no choice but to make this promise. If it was someone else, he wouldn't care. After all, he didn't have to pay a single spirit stone. However, it was his own father. No matter how bad he was, he didn't dare to be accused of disobeying his own father. The group of people exchanged glances, expressing their agreement by not speaking. One had to know that a top-grade spirit stone mine could earn tens of millions of upper-grade spirit stones in a year. It would only take 100 years to recoup the cost. To cultivators, 100 years was not too long. But 2 top-grade spirit stone mines would only take 50 years, not to mention that they could mine it indefinitely. It should be a huge profit. The only risk was that even if everyone worked together, they might not be able to help Yin Bugui unify the cultivation world of China. Then there would be nothing left. But it shouldn't be a big problem. The old man in linen clothes relaxed. The old man in brocade clothes looked at the crowd and smiled at Yin Bugui. Since Palace Lord Yin has put it this way, we naturally can't do anything to make you and your father turn against each other. Sigh, we'll do as Palace Lord Yin says. We shouldn't stay here for long. Let's go. The group of people suddenly left in a hurry. The people of the Cultivation Alliance were all stunned. Then, they all looked at Yin Wuchen, who was in the valley. Needless to say, it was because of his father that Yin Bugui could give up 1 billion spirit stones and retreat without a fight. 1 billion spirit stones. He threw it away just like that. What a deep bond between father and son. Yin Wuchen raised his head slightly and looked in the direction of Yin Bugui's departure. He did not move for a long time. The opponent withdrew, and the challenge ended just like that. It was an unexpected win, and no one felt that there was anything to be happy about. Next, what everyone was most concerned about was the ownership and division of the 1 billion spirit stones. That was a large sum of money. The ones who had the opportunity to divide were naturally the top 10 sects of the Orthodox and Devil sects and the 4 great clans. As for the other sects who did not contribute money or effort and instead watched the show for nothing, they naturally did not have a share. The crowd returned to the 100 Flowers Valley. Yu Qianqiu and Zi Yi followed closely behind the 10,000 demons. They had their money in their hands, and they were a little worried if they did not follow them closely. Running away with money could happen in any era. In the Cultivation Alliance, the first thing to do was to follow the agreement from the beginning. Everyone would get back how much they had contributed. Yu Qianqiu happily pocketed his 40 million. Then, he stood guard at the edge of the Myriad Demons Palace, waiting for the distribution. He thought to himself, I've won 2 rounds, so I should get the biggest share. He also followed beside him with a face full of excitement, waiting to get the money. The 2 guys who only cared about money were smiling from ear to ear, and they looked quite lovable when they saw them. We agreed before that 1 billion spirit stones will be divided into 20 parts, and each part will be 50 million. Winning 1 round will get 50 million. Supporting Immortal Island won the first round, so they should get 50 million first. Yu Qianqiu won 2 rounds, so he should get 100 million. Senior Yin of the 10,000 demons came out to scare off the opponent, so he naturally won 1 round, so the 10,000 demons should also get 50 million. As for the remaining 800 million, I suggest that we split it according to the proportion of contribution, Zhu Xianxian of the Daluo sect suggested. Not bad, this is considered fair. I agree. The Blood Demon Palace, the Corpse sect, the Moon sect, and some other sects that paid expressed their agreement. Yu Qianqiu silently calculated in his heart, and the smile on his face froze, and his expression suddenly darkened. This doesn't seem right. Qiu looked around at the crowd and said, if it wasn't for my master this time, who knows how long this challenge would have lasted, and who knows what would have happened. It can be said that my master ended the last 17 rounds by himself, so the 10,000 demons should get 17 portions of the money. However, the 10,000 demons will not do something like eating all the money alone. I am willing to give 2 portions to the sects that paid but did not contribute. Chapter 399. Haha, it's true that Senior Yin is an honorable man, but he's only made an appearance once, and he hasn't even done anything yet. Isn't this appearance fee a little too high? Zhu Xianxian looked at the crowd and asked with a smile. Zhu Xianxian, don't be so sarcastic. Qiu Wen glared at him and said, everyone is well aware that if it wasn't for my master's arrival, Yanbu Gue wouldn't have thrown down $1 billion for us to take advantage of. Your Deluo sect hasn't even done anything, yet you're already able to take advantage of it. Could it be that you think it's too little? At this time, Yin Wuchen had already gone to rest at the 10,000 Demon shop in the 100 Flowers Valley. With his status, he naturally wouldn't come here to fight for money with a bunch of people. However, as a disciple, Qiu Wen naturally had to work hard. The more he got, the more he could demonstrate his master's value. In addition, this was also a fight for huge profits, so he couldn't just give up like that. Your 10,000 demons want to take 15 portions each? Aren't you afraid of bursting? Zhu Xianxian retorted. There was a lot of sarcasm in the surrounding. The sects that had contributed were obviously not interested in Qiu Yuan's proposal. If he took more, everyone else would naturally get less. Oomph. Those who contribute the most should get more. This logic works everywhere, Qiu Wen said unhappily. Those who contribute the most should get more. I agree with this. Baishan of the 4 great clans stood up and smiled at the crowd. No matter how you calculate, you all agree on 20 portions. Have you all forgotten that the 4 great clans also contributed a portion? Moreover, Yu Qianshou has represented the 4 great clans in 2 consecutive victories. He has contributed a lot. Why don't you all listen to his opinion? He had seen Yu Qianshou's sour expression earlier. It was obvious that he didn't agree with the distribution method, or rather, it wasn't what he wanted. Thus, he came out to remind everyone. Baishan believed that this guy wasn't someone who would easily take a loss, especially when it came to money. Everyone was thinking about their own interests and almost forgot about this great hero. Qiu Yuan was taken aback. He looked at Yu Qianshou and asked, Brother Yu, what do you think? Seeing Yu Qianshou's dark face, he suddenly had a bad feeling. What the hell am I looking at? Yu Qianshou threw a tantrum first. Then he pointed at the crowd and sneered. When it comes to money, all of you are so desperate that you don't even want to fork out a single spirit stone. You even dragged the 4 major clans into this. When it was time to split the money, each of them was even more shameless, wishing that they could put all the money into their own pockets. Today, I've finally witnessed the demeanor of a great sect. Everyone's expressions changed. If it was before, there would definitely be a bunch of people scolding him or teaching him a lesson. But now, after seeing his strength, everyone had to restrain themselves. Baishan smiled and took a step back. It was up to Yu Qianshou to decide whether he would win or lose. He just had to stand up for him at the crucial moment. Qiu Yuan frowned and said, Brother Yu, there's no need to talk about this nonsense. If you have any opinions, why don't you just say it and let everyone hear it? I'm an honest man. I don't have any opinions. I only know that when it came to money, it was agreed that whoever wins more matches will get more money. Those who don't win will not get a share. Yu Qianshou's expression turned fierce. He pointed his fingers and said loudly, They fought 3 matches and won 3 matches. I don't care what's going on between Senior Yin and Yanbu Gue. Anyway, he's able to scare everyone into not daring to accept his challenge. That's his ability. So, I have no opinion even if Senior Yin wins that match. In other words, there are a total of 4 matches and the billion will be split into 4 portions. The number of matches won will be split accordingly. There's no need to be so noisy. Of course, if I say this, people will definitely say that I'm greedy. Moreover, everyone has contributed. Fine. I'll take a step back and say that the sects that have contributed will also be counted as a share. The billion will be split into 5 portions. The winners will take 4 portions, and the remaining portion will be split among those who contributed. After the group of people from supporting Immortal Island heard this, they all nodded and didn't say anything. They had the title of the world's #1 sect, and it was really inconvenient for them to compete with others. Therefore, they didn't say anything. According to Yu Qianshou, if they could get 1/5 of the money, that would be 200 million. It was really not a small amount, and there was no reason for them to disagree. Qiu Yuan frowned and pondered. The other sects that contributed were obviously unhappy. According to Zhu Xianxian, they could get 800 million, but according to Yu Qianzhou, they could only get 200 million. The difference was too big. Yu Qianzhou, according to what you said, you want to take nearly half of the money. Aren't you looking down on the sects too much? Wen Zhongping from a Blood Demon Palace said to the crowd with a smile. It seemed like he wanted to use the sects to pressure Yu Qianzhou. You're old and muddled. Yu Qianzhou's words were shocking. He sneered and said, How did you say that I'm looking down on the sects? If I had known, I would have hidden in the back and waited to get a share of the money. Why did I have to go out and risk my life? In the future, if the Cultivation Alliance has such a good thing, I will definitely support it. Who doesn't like to get a share of the money without doing any work? I was depressed before. Why didn't the sects accept the challenge? I, a nascent soul cultivator, had to go out and fight with a tribulation cultivator. After such a long time, it turns out that there's such a shady business. I've learned a lot. It's worth learning. Someone dared to steal his money, and it wasn't a small amount. He didn't care if it was the Blood Demon Palace or the 10,000 demons. However, these words of mockery and ridicule really made the various sects somewhat embarrassed. Wen Zhongping was especially embarrassed. He couldn't help but fly into a rage and said, Yu Qianzhou, how dare you call yourself old man in front of me? Don't you know that there's a difference in etiquette between seniors and elders in this world? Disrespectful old man, trying to divide the wealth of juniors. Who has ever seen a senior like this? It's fine if a senior like this is disrespectful. The eyes of the world are like torches, and they can tell right from wrong. No one will say that I'm disrespectful, Yu Qianzhou said disdainfully. He thought to himself, Practice your tongue? I'll keep you company. How dare you? Wen Zhongping shouted angrily. The people from the Blood Demon Palace all stood up, looking like they were going to fight. The people from the 4 major clans immediately stood behind Yu Qianzhou, opposing the people from the 10,000 demons. Qiu Wen and Quan Deming quickly stepped in between the two groups, trying to persuade them to talk things out. Yu Qianzhou laughed coldly and said, You want to fight? I've never been afraid of anyone. Back then, the sect leader of On Kwansung, Lu Changqing, was too much of a bully. I was only at the core formation stage back then, but I still dared to kill him. Now, if anyone else wants to try, why don't you think about it? When the time comes, don't blame me for being ruthless and unreasonable. Everyone smiled bitterly when they heard this. Not only did this guy kill the sect leader of On Kwansung, Lu Changqing, but he also crippled the sect leader of the Luo sect, Luo Qingtian. Calling him a lunatic was not an exaggeration. Wen Zhongping was furious. Yu Qianzhou, are you threatening the Blood Demon Palace? Yu Qianzhou glared at him coldly and snorted. I'm threatening you, not the Blood Demon Palace. But if you want to drag the Blood Demon Palace into this, I won't object. In short, there's nothing more than reason. We've agreed before that the more we win, the more we get. I won 2 rounds, so I should take 400 million. That's the bare minimum. If anyone dares to give me less than a spirit stone, try it. I don't care if it's the Blood Demon Palace or the Clearwater Palace. No matter how famous you are, you still have to be reasonable. Otherwise, it's no different from robbery. With such a large sum of money, he definitely wouldn't back down. Everyone looked at each other. This guy openly admitted to threatening Wen Zhongping. It seemed like he wouldn't stop until he got his hands on 400 million. Wen Zhongping would probably lose face in front of so many people, and he wouldn't let this go. Wen Zhongping wanted to use the name of the Blood Demon Palace to pressure Yu Qianzhou, who knew that this guy didn't have any scruples at all. His words went straight to the face, not giving him any leeway to back down. Just as he was flushed with anger, Zhu Xianxian shouted, Yu Qianzhou, this isn't a place for you to behave atrociously. He and Yu Qianzhou had an old grudge, and he had lost face because of it. Now, there was a conflict of interest, so he couldn't help but jump out. How am I behaving atrociously? Yu Qianzhou raised an eyebrow and asked, Zhu Xianxian, even though what I said wasn't pleasant to hear, every word I said was the truth. Which part of it was nonsense? Are you going to use the name of the Daluo sect to pressure me? Have you ever seen me afraid of the Daluo sect? As soon as he said this, everyone immediately remembered how Yu Qianzhou killed Luo Shaoan outside the 100 Flowers Valley and how Zhu Xianxian avoided the battle. Recently, Yu Qianqiu had another fierce battle with the Daoyuo sect leader, and they really didn't see him afraid of the Daoyuo sect. These incidents had also caused the Daoyuo sect to lose face. Zhu Xianxian naturally let his imagination run wild when he heard this. He took a few steps forward, but was stopped by Quan Deming. He couldn't help but fly into a rage out of humiliation and said, "Yu Qianqiu, don't try to be eloquent. Do you dare to fight me to the death?" Everyone was shocked. Wen Zhongping was originally angry, but he was stunned by these words. He looked at Zhu Xianxian speechlessly and thought, even Luo Qingtian isn't his opponent. And you actually want to challenge him? Aren't you overestimating yourself? Let's just talk. Why do you have to find trouble for yourself? He was sober now. Yu Qianqiu was also stunned. He took out a black machete from his storage bag and stabbed it into the ground. He sneered and said, "A gentleman uses his mouth, not his fists. If someone forces me to fight, they should first ask if my 6-foot black blade agrees to it." A murderous chill instantly burst forth from the blade. Everyone quivered. The black fellow's one blade is enough. Power was still lingering in the air. Zhu Xianxian's pupils shrank when he saw the blade, and his anger had mostly cooled down. Qiu Yuan shook his head and smiled bitterly. "Everyone, calm down and discuss this properly. Brother Yu, please put away the blade," he said and gave Quan Deming a look. Quan Deming understood and comforted Zhu Xianxian. He pulled him back to his original position, giving Zhu Xianxian a way out. When Zhongping was also pulled back by Qiu Yuan, Yu Qianqiu also turned around to persuade the people from the 4 major families to leave. He turned around and raised his hand to point at the blade. With a solemn expression, he said in a sonorous voice, "Not for money or reputation, but for reason. The blade is fair, and I will not keep it for now. I will set this as evidence. If there is any injustice, Yu Qianqiu is willing to uphold justice with this blade. Even if the blade is destroyed and I die, I will not hesitate." His words were very righteous and emotional, as if he himself was the embodiment of justice. Everyone present cursed in their hearts. If we want money but don't care about face, then you want money but don't want to lose face. Why are you pretending to be righteous? If it's money, then it's money. Why talk so much about reason? He's clearly telling everyone that if anyone dares to give him less than a piece of spirit stone, he will fight with them. Isn't this bullying? Chapter 400. The people from the 4 major families looked at each other and thought to themselves, "No wonder the great ancestor chose him to be her personal disciple. He's really a talent." Baishan looked at Bai Zitsong meaningfully, but the latter shook his head and smiled bitterly. Many people from the supporting Immortal Island sighed in their hearts. Such a talent was actually expelled from the supporting Immortal Island. If he was still around, he could take over Dongfang Chang'ao's position and represent the supporting Immortal Island in the cultivation world. He would definitely be able to fight for the greatest benefits for the supporting Immortal Island. The supporting Immortal Island lacked shameless people like him. Qiu Yuan's face twitched. He still couldn't understand why Yu Qianqiu said he wanted to join the 10,000 demons. He didn't know if it was true or not. Yu Qianqiu's face was solemn. He crossed his arms and stood beside the saber. He seemed to be determined to maintain fairness and justice. In fact, everyone knew what was going on. It wasn't as righteous as he made it out to be. In the end, it was all about money. However, no one blamed him now. This was the truth. There were some things that people wouldn't say even if they knew the truth. Once it was said, everyone would be embarrassed. If they were to fight, the consequences would be unpredictable. After all, those who could sit here were not 3-year-olds. There was a price to pay for being impulsive. But then again, if Yu Qianqiu didn't possess some strength and dare to cause trouble here, then he would have probably been slapped to death a long time ago. Similarly, if that was the case, he wouldn't have come here to court death. One should do things according to one's strength. Overestimating one's strength would only make one suffer. Retribution would always be on oneself. In the midst of the silence, Yin Wuqin, Niu Sun, Jin Yin, Fan Benlei, and Dongfang Chang Ao walked in together. An aura that belonged to experts instantly covered the entire place. These 5 people were prominent figures from both the Orthodox and demon sections. Everyone present stood slightly to pay their respects. The pupils of the 5 people shrank slightly. They saw the saber standing in the middle of the place, and Yu Qianshou guarding the side of the saber. "What's going on?" Yin Wuchen, who was seated at the front, asked in a deep voice as he swept his gaze across the crowd. Qiuwen immediately went over and explained the whole story respectfully. At the same time, Quan Deming also took the initiative to explain to Jin Yin and Fan Benlei. After understanding what was going on, Yin Wuchen glanced sideways at the few people around him. Then he stared at the unmoving Yu Qianshou and walked over slowly. Yu Qianshou raised an eyebrow and turned around, just in time to meet Yin Wuchen's bright eyes. He also slowly turned around. Yin Wuchen had always exuded the aura of a superior, and at this moment, it was overpowering Yu Qianshou as though he wanted him to submit. However, Yu Qianshou's eyes narrowed slightly. The experience of dominating an area in his previous life appeared in his mind. The pride that he had suppressed for a long time suddenly burst forth from his body. 2 invisible auras of a superior were undoubtedly revealed. One aura that looked down on the world, the other aura that dominated an area. Suddenly, they clashed and clashed. Ordinary mortals might not be able to see anything, but the cultivators present were especially sensitive to auras. They immediately picked up on some clues and looked at Yu Qianshou in shock. They could clearly sense the decisive and murderous aura of a superior from Yu Qianshou. It was impossible for someone who had not been an overlord for a long time to have such an aura. This was not something that could be faked easily. It might be able to deceive ordinary mortals, but in the eyes of a cultivator, it would be immediately exposed. At this moment, the scoundrel aura on Yu Qianshou was nowhere to be seen. His entire person instantly changed. He looked at Yin Wuchen coldly and indifferently, without a trace of fear. In terms of aura, he could completely compete with Yin Wuchen. The people from the 4 great families did not expect Yu Qianshou to have such a side to him. Purple Dress was slightly surprised, but she quickly calmed down. How could an ordinary person compare to Elder Bai's disciple? Yin Wuchen frowned slightly. His gaze paused on the black broadsword. He turned to look at the crowd and said, "The 10,000 demons agree with Yu Qianshou's distribution method." After saying that, he continued walking forward. When he brushed past Yu Qianshou, he stopped and tilted his head to say, "I heard that little brother is a talent of the younger generation. Seeing you today, you really do live up to your reputation." "Senior Yin, you flatter me," Yu Qianshou replied indifferently. "I heard that little brother has already accepted Palace Lord Bu's invitation. When the time comes, I will find a chance to have a chat with little brother." "Senior, I admire your elegance. It is more than I could ask for. If there is a chance, I will definitely pay you a visit." Yu Qianshou bowed slightly and said, "A negotiation between real superiors did not require too much nonsense." The exchange of conditions was reached with a look and a sentence. The meaning was simple. During the competition, Qiu Weiyuan drove you away. I am now sacrificing a lot of benefits to compensate you. Let's forget about what happened in the past. Courtesy demands reciprocity. The other party had made a lot of concessions, and he did not lose anything. Naturally, Yu Qianshou agreed. Yin Wuchen nodded and walked into the Cultivation Alliance. Jin Yin, Fan Benlei, and the others also walked past Yu Qianshou. Dongfang Chang Ao paused for a moment before he turned around and said to everyone, "Supporting Immortals Island agrees with Yu Qianshou's distribution method." He took a deep look at Yu Qianshou. The higher-ups of Supporting Immortals Island had long been informed by the Sect Master not to provoke Yu Qianshou. Although Feng Xiangtian did not explain clearly, there must be something unusual behind it. After a few people who seemed to be more powerful went in, Qiuwen and Quan Deming looked at each other, and the latter said in a clear voice, "Does anyone have a different opinion?" All the sects were a little surprised. Why did even Yin Wuchen give in? This is a little strange. At this moment, Yuan Jioke of the Hexapath Demon Sect suddenly said loudly, "The Hexapath Demon Sect has no opinion." All the sects were stunned again. Yuan Jioke was at odds with Yu Qianqiu just a moment ago. Why did his attitude change so quickly? Yu Qianqiu was also a little puzzled. On the other side, Hua Yinhue of the Moon Clan also said, "The Moon Clan has no opinion either." Everyone looked at each other. Qiu Wen looked around and said in a deep voice, "If no one objects, then this matter is decided." He naturally supported his master's decision. After a while, still no one said anything. Qiu Yuan didn't say anything more. He took out a storage pouch and handed it to Quan Deming of supporting Immortal Island. Then, he took out 2 storage pouches and handed them to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu took it and quickly counted it with his divine sense. After confirming that there were 400 million, he directly stuffed it into the storage bag. Then, he picked up the broadsword on the ground and put it away with satisfaction. It seemed that he was not going to maintain fairness and justice anymore. The remaining 200 million was divided according to the proportion of the capital contribution. Yu Qianqiu stuffed a few million into his storage bag. Patting his storage bag, he slowly walked to Quan Deming's side and glanced at his storage bag. It was as if he was saying, "Now that you have money, it's time for you to pay me what you owe me." Quan Deming shook his head and bitterly smiled. He took out a bag of holding and gave it to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu looked at it. 50 million was not a small amount, so he put it away. He didn't say much and casually walked out of the Cultivation Alliance. Everyone looked at him with indescribable feelings. They did not expect that supporting Immortals Island and the 10,000 demons would not get the biggest profit. Instead, they were taken advantage of by him. They made a lot of money. Zi followed him out excitedly. The two of them did not say goodbye to the 4 families and left. 100 Flower House. Yu Qianqiu returned to his room and was about to do some private things. Who knew that Zi would follow him? He asked, "Don't you know that it is dangerous for a man and a woman to be alone in a room?" Zi subconsciously looked around. She did not seem to know where the danger was. She asked weakly, "Yu Qianqiu, how much did we earn this time?" "Nearly 460 million. Why do you ask?" Yu Qianqiu asked suspiciously. "Do you want to buy something again?" "No, I was just asking," Zi said excitedly. She looked like a money grubber. Yu Qianqiu could not bear to see a beauty like this. He took her hand and sent her out of the room. He closed the door and said, "Go back to your room. Don't run around. Don't disturb my rest." Oh, Zi's footsteps could be heard as she walked back to her room. Yu Qianqiu locked the door and windows and looked around the room. After confirming that there was no one around, he disappeared from the room. In Utopia's military camp, Guan Yu looked at the 3 storage bags on the table and clicked his tongue. 500 million. In just a few months, he had obtained 500 million. Were spirit stones in the cultivation world so easy to obtain? How is the consumption of the limit-breaking pill? Yu Qianqiu asked as he lay on the chair and placed his legs on the table. Guan Yu's expression turned solemn as he said, "This limit-breaking pill is truly miraculous. Out of the 800 nascent soul cultivators, we've already created more than 300 early-stage tribulation-passing experts. With this 500 million, it's enough to create the remaining 500 nascent soul cultivators into early-stage tribulation-passing experts in a short period of time. There are already 300? Good. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. Then, he frowned and said, "Just because their cultivation has reached a certain level doesn't mean that they have the strength of an early-stage tribulation-passing expert. Use the 500 million to raise the cultivation of the remaining 500 people as soon as possible. Then, gather these 800 people together for combat training. Spirit stones are hard to obtain. I need to rely on these 800 people to lay eggs. The spirit stones of the 10,000 people behind us will depend on these 800 people." Guan Yu nodded. When he thought about the scene of 800 well-trained tribulation-passing experts being dragged out together, he could not help but gasp. He had organized combat training for a long time, so he could imagine how terrifying it would be if these people gathered together to fight. If Yu Qianqiu wanted to do something heartless, the consequences would be unimaginable. You have to keep a close eye on my two disciples and Gu Qingyan. When their cultivation reaches the tribulation passing stage, throw them into the combat training field and harshly hone them. It would be best to treat them as hypothetical enemies in the army and torture them to death. Of course, don't really kill them. It doesn't matter if they are beaten half to death. At most, they can come back after they have recovered. Yu Qianqiu said lightly. They are your disciples. You really have the heart to do that. Guan Yu said hesitantly. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and said, It's not that I don't have the heart to do that. It's precisely because they're my disciples that I have to be strict with them. It's better to sweat and bleed than to lose their lives when the time comes. Chapter 401. In the Cultivation Alliance of the Hundred Flowers Valley, Yin Wuchun and the other experts at the end of the tribulation passing stage had already left. Everything seemed to have returned to normal. Over the past few days, it was rare for him to have such free time. Yu Qianqiu was bored, so he basically hid in his room and studied the Jade archives that recorded the rules of the star chart circulation. He wanted to comprehend the remaining 3 star charts as soon as possible. In the vast sea of stars, the star paths were complicated. Perhaps it was because he was anxious for quick results, but it was difficult for him to calm down. He was deep in thought, but he was unable to connect the dots. As for Zi, she had just experienced the prosperity of the world. How could she stay alone for a long period of time? Yu Qianqiu simply let Wu Liqing and the other 3 bring her around so that she wouldn't keep sneaking into his room, which would disturb him even more. For the next few days, the 4 of them made Zi very happy. They had a lot of fun. Actually, Yu Qianqiu could tell that the 4 of them seemed to be interested in Zi, but he couldn't really say anything about it. A daughter of a family was sought after by hundreds of families. Whoever could pursue her depended on their ability. Everyone was on the same side, so there was no need for him to stop them. With his thoughts on his mind, he stopped in front of the window. Suddenly, he saw Baishan and the other 3 rushing into the Hundred Flowers house. He knew that they were probably looking for him. Sure enough, not long after, there was a series of footsteps and a knock on the door. Yu Qianqiu said, Come in. After Baishan and the other 3 entered, they bowed in unison and greeted Mr. Yu Qianqiu turned around and smiled. Why are you all in such a hurry? Is something the matter? The 4 of them looked rather solemn. Baishan nodded and said, The people that the Cultivation Alliance sent to the Eastern Sea to keep an eye on Yin Bugue have sent news. This morning, several hundred flying artifacts filled with people landed on the Wuji Island. I'm afraid that the foreign cultivators are already prepared to make their move. So soon? I'm not ready yet. Yu Qianqiu frowned. Baishan continued to say, The Cultivation Alliance has gathered all the people in charge of the various sects to discuss this matter. The 4 of us have already been notified by the elders that the 4 great families will follow Mr.'s lead and follow Mr.'s decision. Mr., please represent the 4 great families in this Cultivation Alliance convention. Yu Qianqiu was slightly startled. He waved his hand and said, No, this responsibility is too great. I can't bear it. He knew what the 4 great clans were thinking. They wanted to tie him to the 4 great clans, and their target was naturally by Changchun. It could be said that they had sacrificed a lot and put in a lot of effort. However, if a great battle were to break out, his advantage was to be flexible in the dark. He couldn't fight head-on. If the situation was really critical, he could run away and hide at any time. Dragging the 4 great clans with him was not a burden, but it was definitely inconvenient. The strength of the 4 great clans was not weak, but now was not the time to be greedy. Sir, Baishan still wanted to persuade him, but Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and interrupted. Don't say any more. I'll tell you the truth. This time, my master has entrusted me with something else. I'll just follow along and play with some things. If I get too involved, it will affect my own matters. If my master gets angry, no one in the world can bear it. He simply used Bai Changchun as a shield. The 4 of them looked at each other. Baishan asked, Sir, can you tell us what it is? Perhaps the four great clans can do something for the great ancestor. I can't say that. Yu Qianshou smiled and refused. The four of them begged again, but Yu Qianshou wouldn't agree no matter what. In the end, the four of them had no choice but to leave. They had to report this matter to the four great clans as soon as possible. After the four of them left, he stood by the window and pondered for a long time. In the end, he went downstairs leisurely. He took a table, ordered some free food, and slowly enjoyed it alone. It was really leisurely. The shopkeeper of the 100 Flowers house was speechless. He had never seen such a righteous person who ate and drank for free. He didn't know how long he was going to stay. Just as he was enjoying his wine, Xionghui came in from outside the shop. He glanced inside and saw him. He quickly walked over and smiled. "You're in such a good mood. I volunteered to invite you. Give me some face and come with me to the Cultivation Alliance first." "Invite me?" Yu Qianshou was startled. "Invite me for what?" "The lone cultivators nominated you to be their representative. You'll represent them to participate in the Alliance Conference." Xionghui smiled. "Nominated me to be their representative? What a joke. I don't even know them. Tell them I won't do it." Yu Qianshou refused without saying anything. He subconsciously felt that there was a conspiracy. He had just rejected the four great clans, and now there was a group of lone cultivators. Who knew them? "That's good. Why don't you go? Others can't even beg for it." Xionghui felt strange. "Good?" Yu Qianshou's hand paused. He asked, "What's good about it?" "The fact that the lone cultivators recommended you means that everyone recognizes your strength. They believe that you can protect their interests. That's what everyone wants. Isn't that a good thing?" Xionghui said matter-of-factly. Yu Qianshou was still doubtful. Xionghui cupped his hands and said, "Yu Qianshou, just give me some face and go. I've said in front of Elder Quan that I'll definitely invite you. If you don't go, I'll be laughed at." After begging and pestering, Yu Qianshou finally couldn't resist his begging and was kicked out of the 100 Flowers house. On the way, Yu Qianshou said solemnly, "I'll see what it is first. If it's a thankless task, tell them to find someone else as soon as possible. As long as you go, I'll be able to report. Even if you turn around and come back, it's none of my business." Xionghui smiled. Yu Qianshou looked at him in surprise. He had a look that said, "You're so cruel." He didn't know when this guy became so smart. He used to think he was stupid. Actually, there were only a few hundred lone cultivators who joined the Cultivation Alliance. Their cultivation levels weren't too bad either. At the very least, they were at the core formation stage. Those with low cultivation levels were still worrying about earning spiritual stones for cultivation. They didn't have the time to think about how to integrate into the upper class of the cultivation world. Even if they had the intention, they might not even be willing to look them in the eye. Outside the Cultivation Alliance, Xionghui led Yu Qianshou to more than 600 lone cultivators in different clothes. There were men and women, old and young, and their cultivation levels varied. Yu Qianshou glanced at the crowd roughly and found that many of them had higher cultivation levels than him. With a puzzled expression, he cupped his hands and said, "I'm Yu Qianshou. Although I'm also a lone cultivator, I don't know why I'm chosen to be the representative of the lone cultivators." The group of people looked at Yu Qianshou with awe. This was the guy who had caused a stir in the past. A few days ago, he even killed 2 cultivators in the middle stage of the tribulation passing stage. It was said that he had taken a big bite out of the big Sect's hands. It was said that he had 400 to 500 million. When had such a powerful lone cultivator appeared in the cultivation world? Not only did he steal from the big Sect's mouths, it was said that he had also publicly threatened the other sections. Even the old devil, Yin Wuchen, had to give him face. As a fellow lone cultivator, who else could we recommend if not you? If it were someone else, we wouldn't be convinced. At this time, a man with a thick beard came out and cupped his hands. "Mr. Yu, we are a part of the Chinese cultivation world. Now that the Chinese cultivation world is facing a foreign invasion, we are willing to do our best. However, although we have this intention, the other sects may not take us seriously. You have a high cultivation level and are famous in the cultivation world. Both the righteous and demonic sects have to give you some face. With you as the representative of the lone cultivators, I believe that the big sects will not look down on us because of you. At least, they won't let us be wrong for nothing. Therefore, we recommend you to be our representative. If it were someone else, I, Hong Ming, would be the first to be unconvinced. Yes, if it were someone else, we wouldn't be convinced. Please don't refuse, sir, we believe in you. The group of people chattered. So that's how it is. Yu Qianqiu looked at the crowd thoughtfully. If the sects were the regular army, then these people were the guerrillas. It was hard to refuse such kindness. Could it be that I have to be the guerrilla leader again? Guerrillas were good. If they could win, they would fight. If they couldn't, they would run. Most importantly, they had more freedom. They could also find an excuse not to fight head-on. This representative was worth it. Since you all think so highly of me, I have no reason to refuse. Shall I give it a try? Yu Qianqiu said. Thank you, sir. The bearded lone cultivator, Hong Ming, was the first to reply. The others also echoed him. It was not orderly at all. They were indeed the characteristics of lone cultivators. Yu Qianqiu frowned. The words unorganized and undisciplined appeared in his mind. However, he did not say anything and nodded to Xionghui. Xionghui led him into the Cultivation Alliance. As soon as they entered, they saw hundreds of sects representatives surrounding the flat ground, discussing nonstop. The big sect sat in the center circle. Baishan was also among them. However, he did not see anyone else from the four big clans. Baishan was probably the representative of the four big clans. Xionghui reported to Quan Deming and retreated. Everyone's eyes were focused on Yu Qianqiu. They had a strange look on their faces. This guy had become the representative of lone cultivators in the blink of an eye. Yu Qianqiu did not care about that. He grabbed a futon and threw it on the ground. He sat on the outermost circle. The small sects representatives on both sides subconsciously moved to the left and right. Although he was the representative of the non-mainstream lone cultivators, he was a person who liked to be in the limelight. Ordinary small sects would not dare to provoke him. The sects continued to discuss. Yu Qianqiu did not say anything and listened quietly. It turned out that the problem of manpower and financial resources had been solved. In terms of financial resources, the Cultivation Alliance would send people to supervise the sect's spiritual stone mines. Half of the output of each spiritual stone mine would be supplied to the Cultivation Alliance. In terms of manpower, the righteous sects would be led by supporting Immortals Island. The demonic sects would be led by 10,000 demons. The allocation of resources between the righteous and demonic sects would be coordinated by supporting Immortals Island and 10,000 demons. It seemed that when the sects faced the threat of life and death, the previous problems were no longer a problem. They were quickly solved. As for what happened after that, Yu Qianqiu listened to it. It was all about the righteous and demonic sects preparing for war. There was also the issue of spiritual stone distribution. No one talked about the lone cultivators. This was a good thing, but since so many lone cultivators had joined the Cultivation Alliance, why didn't the lone cultivators get a share of the activity funds? As the representative of the lone cultivators, if he did not fight for it, who would fight for it? He had just taken office, and he was not given any funds. This was clearly a slap to his face. Yu Qianqiu's face darkened. He slowly stood up and said in a low voice, I have an opinion. Chapter 402. Everyone turned to look and were slightly stunned when they saw that it was him. They did not know what he had to say, but his expression did not look too good. Qiu rubbed his head, feeling a headache coming on. It was fine if this guy did not speak, but once he did, it was hard to imagine what he would say. His opinions were always hard to bear. Why did he always feel helpless every time he met this guy? He sighed and asked, Brother Yu, why don't you share your opinions with us? Yu Qianqiu cupped his fists expressionlessly and said, I'm not sure if everyone knows, but I'm fortunate enough to be the representative of the itinerant cultivators who are temporarily residing in the Chinese cultivation world. Everyone looked at each other. Baishan frowned and thought, You're not willing to be the representative of the four major clans, but the representative of the itinerant cultivators. What's the meaning of this? Wen nodded and said, Of course we know about this. What are you trying to say? I want to ask everyone. Every sect has a share in the distribution of the spirit stones. Why aren't there any for the itinerant cultivators? They're also willing to do their bit for the Chinese cultivation world. Why do you have to treat them differently? This seems to be unfair. I hope everyone can consider the itinerant cultivators and allocate a share from a budget. Yu Qianqiu said solemnly. For money again? Everyone was speechless. Wen looked around and said, This money was gathered from the daily mining of the spirit stone mines by the various sections. It is only natural for it to be returned to the hands of the various sects when it is needed. Wandering cultivators did not contribute a single spirit stone, yet they have to take a share. This is indeed a bit unreasonable. Brother you making things difficult for us. That's right. How can we split the money without contributing anything? The sects roared in agreement. Everyone, please listen to me. Yu Qianqiu cupped his fists at everyone. After the discussion died down, he continued, I, Yu Qianqiu, have always been the most reasonable person. I would never do something so unreasonable. Itinerant cultivators were weak in the cultivation world. It was impossible for them to occupy famous mountains and great lakes to mine spirit stones like the various sects. So where would they get the money to hand it over? They had always lived and died on their own. In order to survive, they often did despicable things, so the other sects did not care about them. To put it bluntly, no sect thought highly of them. Even so, but looking around, Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and pointed outside. He said emotionally, right outside, those unaffiliated cultivators who you don't like joined the Cultivation Alliance without hesitation when they heard that the cultivators of Huaxia are in trouble. They are willing to sacrifice their lives for the cultivators of Huaxia at any time. Their selflessness can be proved by the sun and the moon. Yu Qianqiu, Wen couldn't bear to listen any longer and couldn't help but interrupt. Then he looked at the reactions of the various sects, only to see that they weren't moved by his words at all. The expressions on their faces were very strange, and it was clear that they were thinking the same thing as him. Brother you, just tell me how much money you want. But let me make it clear first, if you ask for too much, we won't give you any more. Wen was too lazy to beat around the bush with him. If he really went around in circles, who knew where he would end up? And the loss might be even greater. Yu Qianqiu's expression softened a little. It was fine as long as he gave money. For such things, if you did not ask for it, they would not give it to you. You would only have a chance if you asked for it. No matter how much it was better than nothing. Therefore, he nodded in relief. Actually, they never asked me, their representative, to make any requests to the Cultivation Alliance. But I feel that with a stable source of spirit stones, the hearts of the people will be stable, and it will be easier to command. Senior Qiu, there are more than 600 people outside. How about 100 superior grade spirit stones per month for each of them? You're crazy. Wen was almost roaring. I, the palace master of 10,000 demons, can't even get 100 superior grade spirit stones per month. You want us to give each of them 100 superior grade spirit stones per month for a group of lone cultivators? Yu Qianqiu, you've gone too far. The criticism from the various sects came one after another, and it was simply the anger of the crowd. Yu Qianqiu was stunned for a moment before he reacted. In recent years, he had gotten used to earning a lot of money, and he had almost forgotten that each faction's money was also accumulated over many years. He had never heard of anyone receiving more than 100 high-grade spirit stones in a month, not even 50 high-grade spirit stones. Some sects even distributed low-grade spirit stones in a dozen low-grade spirit stones. Of course, the people with high positions in the various sects could use a lot of spirit stones, but it was completely different from receiving them according to the rules. Damn it, I've broadened my horizons too fast, and I almost forgot the days when I was poor. How shameful. Yu Qianqiu said awkwardly that, please calm down, everyone. I was too quick with my words, and I misspoke. I said 1 superior grade spirit stone as 100 superior grade spirit stones. Please don't misunderstand. I think you're so rich that 100 superior grade spirit stones are nothing to you, right? The Luo sect's Zhu Xianxian couldn't help but say. When everyone heard this, they looked at Yu Qianshou in deep thought. This guy was young, but he had a lot of money on him. Just the money he had gotten in this period of time, 100 upper grade spirit stones, was not even a drop in the bucket. Zhu, what do you mean by that? Yu Qianshou glanced at him coldly, and his tone darkened. He raised his eyebrows and said, I've said something wrong, and I've already apologized. Are you trying to pick a fight with me? If so, just say it. I'll play with you anytime. Zhu Xianxian was also a dignified Deluo sect's representative. After being provoked in front of everyone, how could he bear it? Even if he could bear it, he couldn't. If he didn't put on an act, he would be humiliated by Yu Qianshou again and again. How could he face others in the future? He immediately jumped up from the cattail hassock, and Quan Deming, who was beside him, immediately pulled him back. This was something that everyone had expected. Yu Qianshou, don't be so arrogant. You'll get what you deserve sooner or later. Zhu Xianxian roared, still unwilling to give up. The various sects' representatives shook their heads. What happened in the past was already in the past, and a little humiliation should be tolerated. Since you can't win against him, why can't you control your mouth? Aren't you just looking for trouble? Yu Qianshou sneered, Don't worry, if I really get what I deserve, I'll definitely kill you first. Hearing this, the group of people sitting cross-legged looked at each other speechlessly. They sighed inwardly. The current Yu Qianshou was no longer the Yu Qianshou of the past. Not to mention Zhu Xianxian. As long as he had a saber in his hand, how many people would dare to challenge him? They didn't manage to kill this brat back then, but now that this brat had made a name for himself, and his momentum was growing, it wouldn't be easy to deal with him again. All right, don't talk so much. Can't you see the situation now? We're here to discuss a solution, not to quarrel. Qiu Wuyuan shouted. The way he looked at Zhu Xianxian was clearly telling him that he asked for it. The way he looked at Yu Qianshou was complicated. If the 10,000 demons really recruited this brat, they didn't know if it would be a blessing or a disaster. No matter where he went, he would get into trouble. Those loose cultivators were really ruthless. They actually pushed this brat out to be their representative. Who knew what trouble he would cause in the future? Quan Deming helplessly pushed Zhu Xianxian back to the cattail hassock, then looked at Yu Qianshou and said, Yu Qianshou, it's impossible to get one top-grade spirit stone. Only the disciples who are always ready for battle can get one top-grade spirit stone every month. The loose cultivators that you represent have not been assigned any missions yet. How can they enjoy the same treatment as the disciples who are always in danger? You keep saying that it's fair, but do you think it's fair? That didn't seem right. Yu Qianshou scratched his nose and said, Elder Quan, there are at least tens of thousands of disciples from all the sects who are ready for battle, and I only have about 600 people here. One spirit stone per person, that's only about 600 in a month. Compared to the huge financial resources of the entire Cultivation Alliance, this is a small amount. Do you think you can make an exception? He still wanted to fight for it. No matter how big their financial resources are, they're still prepared. Once the war starts, the consumption of elixirs and instruments will be huge, and they need to spend a lot of money to purchase them. Also, a large amount of money is used as a reward, and it's not something that can be given to anyone, Quan Deming explained. If it was someone else, they would have been thrown out long ago. Who would have bothered to bargain with him and explain so much? Then how much can you give? Yu Qianshou frowned. Quan Deming and Qiu Wuyuan exchanged a look, and Qiu Wuyuan looked at the crowd and shook his head. Since these 600 individual cultivators are also members of the Cultivation Alliance, I suggest we reduce the spiritual stones given by half and give them 50 mid-grade spiritual stones. What do you guys think? After a month, it's only about 300 top-grade spiritual stones. I think it's acceptable. Quan Deming nodded. I think it's acceptable too, Bai Shan, who represented the 4 major families, said. Hua Yinhue from the Moon Clan also said it was acceptable, followed by Yuan Jiukui from the Six Paths Demon Clan. Everyone couldn't help but look at Yuan Jiukui. The first 2 families were still understandable, But since when did the Six Paths Demon Clan stand on Yu Qianzhou's side? Yu Qianzhou was also a little puzzled. What did this old guy mean by showing his goodwill so many times? The other sects wouldn't start a feud with Yu Qianzhou over a mere 300 spiritual stones in front of him. The matter was passed almost smoothly. Although the money was a little less, Yu Qianzhou had his own plan, so he didn't argue too much. Just as he was about to sit down, he heard Xiao Wuan say, "Yu Qianzhou, since those individual cultivators have enjoyed the benefits of the Cultivation Alliance, they have to be restrained by the Cultivation Alliance. They're not like the disciples of other sects, and they're used to being alone. If the situation is critical and they are needed, can you restrain them?" Hearing this, Yu Qianzhou straightened his back and said with a cold tone, "I have never forced them. But since they push me to be the leader, it's too late for them to not be restrained by me from the moment I stepped into this place. If one doesn't listen, I'll kill one. If two don't listen, I'll kill a pair. If worst comes to worst, I'll kill them all." Hearing this, everyone's heart trembled. This madman might really do something like that. At first, they thought that those individual cultivators were cunning and pushed him to be the leader. Now that they thought about it, many of them were going to be in trouble. Just as everyone was thinking, Yu Qianzhou suddenly changed the topic. He looked around and said proudly, "It won't be long before you see these 600 individual cultivators will be like an invincible army. Wherever I point, they will fight. There is no question of not being restrained by me. You will see." Chapter 403. Hearing this, everyone was stunned for a moment before they smiled. It was a fool's dream to command a group of rogue cultivators as an army in the secular world in a short period of time. Not to mention rogue cultivators. Even among the disciples of the various sects, how many of them had the spirit to sacrifice themselves and put their lives in the hands of others? This matter was passed off as a joke, and no one cared about it. They continued to discuss the issue of coordination and command between the various sections. Yu Qianzhou sat at the back and listened to him obediently. The various sects seemed to be trying their best to avoid the issue of rogue cultivators. From the beginning to the end, no one proposed to assign tasks to the rogue cultivators. In reality, no one wanted to provoke him, lest this guy ask for money again if they were to get involved. Although it had nothing to do with him, Yu Qianzhou listened very seriously. After the discussion, he was the first to walk out of the Cultivation Alliance. Outside the door, a group of rogue cultivators had not left. They were chatting idly while waiting for him. As soon as they saw him come out, they immediately quieted down and looked at him, hoping to hear some good news. Almost everyone present was the best among the rogue cultivators, but rogue cultivators were rogue cultivators. In the cultivation world, they were like the poorest people in the secular world. They yearned to integrate into the upper class of society, but it was extremely difficult. Therefore, they hoped to use this opportunity to gain the recognition of the various sections. Yu Qianzhou paced back and forth on the steps outside the door. After thinking for a while, he stopped and looked at the crowd with a faint smile. "Just now, some of you questioned me as the representative of the rogue cultivators. You're afraid that I won't be able to restrain you at the critical moment. Although I've already patted my chest and promised, I still want to know the truth from everyone. Are you really willing to follow my orders? If not, it's not too late to regret it now, lest something unpleasant happens in the future." Yes, many people shouted without hesitation. There were also many people who looked at each other and hesitated for a while before reluctantly shouting the word yes. It seemed that there were many people who wanted to make use of Yu Qianzhou, but there were probably not many who were willing to listen to him. Coincidentally, there were people from various sects coming out from the door. When they saw this scene, they all shook their heads and left with a smile. The meaning was clear. A rogue cultivator was a rogue cultivator. Yu Qianzhou took in the expressions of the rogue cultivators. His eyes narrowed and a hint of sharpness flashed across them. He smiled and said, "It's good that everyone is willing. There's something I want to tell you." Originally, The Cultivation Alliance's budget of spirit stones was only given to the sects that had contributed money. None of you had contributed money, so you didn't get a share. However, under my efforts, the Alliance agreed to let us enjoy half of the disciples of each sect who were preparing for the war. Each of you can receive 50 mid-grade spirit stones per month. Although the money is small, it has nothing to do with us for the time being. If there's a need for us in the future, I will definitely fight for it for everyone. I will not let anyone suffer a loss. Everyone's expression was a bit gloomy. The Cultivation Alliance obviously did not treat them the same as the disciples of the other sections. Amidst the silence, a woman's voice suddenly grumbled softly. I thought what would happen if I pushed him to be the representative. I didn't expect it to still be like this. Then why should we be controlled by him? Then a man reprimanded in a low voice, "Shut up. If you have something to say, go back and talk." Everyone looked towards the two who spoke. Yu Qianqiu heard the voice and looked over. In the crowd, there was a man and a woman who seemed to be a couple. Both of them had a cultivation level of the late core formation stage. The woman's clothes were revealing more than half of her full breasts. She had quite an enchanting charm. The man's face was fierce-looking and fierce. The two of them were avoiding Yu Qianqiu's gaze with flickering eyes. What a full and charming stunner. Yu Qianqiu clicked his tongue. His gaze was unscrupulously lingering on the woman's breasts. Then, he walked down the stairs towards the two. The people in front of him made way for him. When he arrived in front of the two, he looked at the woman and asked with a smile, "I wonder if this beauty is already taken?" His gaze was still constantly taking advantage of her. When everyone heard this, they were stunned. They didn't expect that this Yu Qianqiu was also a lecher. At first, the two of them panicked. They thought that Yu Qianqiu wanted to do something. They didn't expect him to say something like this. After the woman recovered from her shock, an amorous expression appeared on her face. Her bright eyes were watery as she looked at him. The man's face was filled with shame and anger. He looked at Yu Qianqiu in front of him, as if he was trying his best to suppress his anger. He gritted his teeth and said, "Mister, please behave yourself. We are dual cultivation partners." "Oh, so that's how it is." Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. He looked at the man and smiled. "I said before that if you don't want to listen to my orders, it's not too late to regret it. Otherwise, something unpleasant will happen in the future. However, someone just said that he was willing, but in the blink of an eye, he changed his mind. He's clearly playing with me. What do you think we should do with people who go back on their words?" The woman already felt that something was wrong. She subconsciously retreated. The man quickly cupped his hands and said, "Mister, please forgive me." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and interrupted him. He pointed at the woman and said, "Kill her, and I'll spare your life. Otherwise, we'll die together." The loose cultivators looked at each other speechlessly. This guy was going to kill someone if he was unhappy. Everyone slowly retreated, afraid that they would be caught in the crossfire. The man's expression changed. He and the woman both retreated. Suddenly, a cold light flashed from the storage pouch on their waists. The two immediately jumped onto their flying swords and tried to escape. Yu Qianqiu stood expressionlessly. In an instant, dozens of green lights shot out from his sleeves. With a hissing sound, they tore through the air and chased after the two of them. "Ah!" Two screams were heard. The green lights flashed in the air, and two clouds of blood mist appeared. With Yu Qianqiu's current cultivation, he didn't even care about the middle stage of the tribulation passing stage. How could two cultivators in the late stage of the core formation stage be a match for him? He killed them easily. Along with the shrill screams, many people immediately dashed out from the Cultivation Alliance. Qiu Wen, Quan Deming, and the others came out just in time to see the end. Dozens of green lights returned from the sky and slipped into Yu Qianqiu's sleeves. "What happened?" Quan Deming asked one of the disciples guarding the door. The disciple immediately told him what happened. Qiu Wen, Quan Deming, and the others looked at each other. This guy really didn't hold back. Previously, he told them to kill one person if they didn't listen. If they didn't listen, he would kill both of them. The group of loose cultivators grieved. Many of them secretly regretted recommending Yu Qianqiu to be their leader. They didn't know what would happen to them in the future. It was too late to back out now. However, in the following period of time, Yu Qianqiu's actions greatly surprised everyone. He spent a sum of money to prepare a one-piece black suit for every loose cultivator. He even specially embroidered the word loose cultivator on the chest. Usually, he led everyone to tour around the 100 Flowers Valley every day. He called it unified training, but in fact, everyone just had to follow him to play. Every day, he left early and returned late. When he returned to the 100 Flowers Valley, he paid out his own pocket and treated everyone to good wine and food for free. The group of people was confused and didn't know what he was doing. In the end, they were too lazy to think about it and simply followed him. After all, they didn't have to pay out of their own pocket. Therefore, a group of mass people could be seen in the 100 Flowers Valley every day. Not only were they masked, but the word embroidered on their chests told everyone who they were. Such an unusual action naturally attracted the attention of various sections. They all secretly sent people to investigate. In the end, they found out that this group of people was so bored every day. They were either hunting in the mountains or catching fish in the rivers. They were completely mystifying. In the end, they were too lazy to send people to investigate. Anyway, it was a group of loose cultivators. Let that lunatic do whatever he wants, as long as they didn't cause any trouble. He also didn't understand what Yu Qianqiu was doing. After playing with him a few times, she also felt bored. It was more fun to be with the 4 people who flattered her every day. Therefore, she went further and further with Bai Zicong and the other 3. In the beginning, they didn't return for 1 or 2 days, but now they didn't return for several days. Yu Qianqiu didn't care about her. He still led a group of masked loose cultivators to train. Half a month later, Yanbu Gui's side began to launch a few probing attacks. Several small sects were wiped out by them. The Huaxia cultivators immediately made a decision. They couldn't be passive. They had to take the initiative to attack. The people of the righteous and devil sects were urgently mobilized. After setting up defenses in some important places, a large number of elites began to gather, preparing to attack Yanbu Gui's lair, Wuji Island. In the headquarters of the Cultivation Alliance in the 100 Flowers Valley, except for some representatives of various sects, almost all the people who could be used were transferred away. The only one who didn't move was Yu Qianqiu and his group of loose cultivators. However, they also received a mission that was almost not dangerous. That was to help defend the headquarters of the Cultivation Alliance. On the day they received the mission, the people of the Cultivation Alliance who should leave had left. As usual, Yu Qianqiu led a group of loose cultivators to wander around. After arriving at a remote valley outside the 100 Flowers Valley, Yu Qianqiu looked around and gathered everyone together to give them a lecture as usual. After giving his lecture, he continued to circle around this group of people who were standing in a disorderly manner with a smile. However, today was the day he had been planning for a long time. Something was destined to happen. He went around to the back of the hundreds of people. His smile suddenly became strange. He faced the crowd and opened his 5 fingers. A divine sense instantly shrouded everyone. Everyone immediately felt that something was wrong. When they came to their senses, the surrounding scene had changed. It was the same valley, but not even a blade of grass grew. Around them, there was another group of masked people holding Dharma artifacts. However, there was no word loose cultivators on their chests. They had already surrounded them. The only one who didn't wear a mask was a red-faced, long-bearded man in green. The man with an extraordinary bearing sat on an unusually strong horse. He stroked his beard and said in a deep voice, "You have all been surrounded by me. Give up the meaningless resistance, and I will spare your lives." "Where is this? How could this be? Who are you?" The group of loose cultivators looked around in confusion. They didn't see Yu Qianqiu. In a panic, they quickly took out their Dharma artifacts and prepared to defend themselves. Guan Yu's phoenix eyes narrowed slightly. He raised his hand and waved. Without saying a word, the masked people around him each took out a handful of astral breaker talismans and threw them out. Bam, bam, bam. There was a loud explosion. The strong air wave shook the group of loose cultivators. Screams could be heard everywhere. Then, like wolves entering a flock of sheep, the masked people around them started a crazy massacre. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.